Good morning. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, February the 10th. My name is John French, and I'm the acting mayor for the month of February. And as such, I get the pleasure of chairing this morning's meeting. Hutsquallen Quisquelipnut, Squamish Oemwe. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish people. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and it'll be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting today, and for today's meeting, that is Melissa Von Blitto. Council, item number 2 on our agenda is a recommendation that we adopt today's agenda. That is moved by Mayor Herford and seconded by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Councillor Chris Pettingill is joining us today remotely and is online with us. Councillor Pettingill, you can hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Just can't find my mute button.
Okay, great. And we can hear you. So that gets us off to a great start. Item number 3 on our report today, or on our agenda today, staff reports. And we'll be discussing processing improvements and development incentives. I'll turn it over to staff for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Committee of the Whole. My name is Bryan Daly, Planner with Community Development. With me today is Jesse Fletcher, Manager of Current Planning, and Jonas Belaniskis, Senior Director of Community Development. Staff are seeking feedback today on proposed processing efficiencies and development incentives that are intended to address recent industry feedback on the construction sector economic climate. At the October 21st, 2025 regular council meeting, council gave the ACC and DCC bylaws first 3 readings. As part of the ACC and DCC bylaw project, staff engaged with the development community for feedback on the proposed bylaw rates. The Urban Development Institute, also known as UDI, is an organization that represents some of the local development community. They noted that any kind of cost increase in the current economic environment would likely slow development, and were concerned about the impact the increased charges would have on construction projects. Along with these concerns, UDI shared some recommendations that could reduce costs by reducing processing times and requirements. The ACC and DCC bylaws are scheduled for consideration of adoption on February 17th, 2026. Should these bylaws be adopted, development charges will increase for new development applications. The construction industry, new housing in particular, is facing challenging financial conditions with project costs exceeding achievable sales prices. Production of new housing supply is expected to continue lagging behind existing housing need, at least in the short term. Observations within Squamish are similar to current national trends, where a growing number of approved projects are on hold and not proceeding to construction, and the number of new projects entering the development application stage is diminishing. This trend is likely to slow down the medium-term housing supply, which may lead to continuation of the housing affordability issue in the longer term. Table 1 on this slide demonstrates the targets identified to achieve the various housing targets for the district, including the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund target, the 2023 Housing Needs Report target, and the 2024 Interim Housing Needs Report target. As Table 1 demonstrates, the district is missing the Housing Accelerator Fund target by 276 units and its Housing Needs Report target by 711 units. The district is achieving its interim housing need target. The district is also subject to a housing target order, which counts occupancies as opposed to housing starts. These targets are 25% lower than the interim housing needs requirement in the table above. The district must continue to facilitate the construction of new residential units of all types and tenures to meet the growing population's needs. In 2024, 8 residential development permit applications were brought forward to council. These DP applications proposed 571 apartment units and 75 townhomes. In 2025, 4 residential DP applications were brought forward to council. These applications contained 89 rental apartment units and 158 townhomes. Only one of these approved permits has proceeded to building permit to date. Table 2 on this slide summarizes housing starts from 2023 to 2025. Staff have worked diligently with applicants to issue permits in 2025, resulting in a higher permit issuance for this year. Of the permits classified as approved but not issued, indicating the developer has not paid for their permit, most were issued in 2023 or earlier. There are currently 642 units under review at building permit stage. 297 of these units were approved by DP in 2022 or earlier and have not proceeded due to current market conditions. At the time of writing this report, the district currently has 4 building permit applications ready to be issued, pending payment of fees and development cost charges. These 4 permits would permit the construction of 200 apartment units and 75 townhomes. The delay in the applicants coming to pick up the permits and start construction is reflective of the challenging market conditions. Staff are proposing several measures that could potentially support approved projects moving forward to construction. The first measure is increasing the delegated criteria for development permits and development variance permits. We'll start with the increasing the delegated criteria for DPs. So based on past experience, expanding the delegated DP criteria improves permitting timelines, which involves more project approvals delegated to staff. Currently, only projects within the Squamish Business Park are projects proposing up to 20 residential units and 400 square meters of non-residential space are delegated to staff for approval. This means the majority of form and character DP applications require council approval. Requiring council approval can add significant time delays to a project and compete for time with other council business on agendas. Staff have reviewed the 2024 and 2025 council agendas for DPs proposing less than 50 units and or more than 400 square meters of employment space and the amount of time spent on each item. All permits included in the analysis were approved by council. Some contained minor variances to the zoning bylaw. In 2024, there were 6 DPs that met the proposed criteria, which account for 130 minutes of scheduled council time as indicated on the agenda. The 6 DPs proposed 161 residential units and 10,459 square meters of employment space. In 2025, there were 5 DPs that met the criteria, which accounted for 218 minutes of council time. Those 5 DPs proposed 139 residential units. This analysis does not account for time spent waiting on a council agenda for consideration. However, this regularly involves at least a 4-week delay in the approval process. Expanding the delegated permit criteria to include project proposing up to 50 residential units with no limit on the amount of employment space could streamline development processing and free up space on council agendas for other business. Form and character DPs are strictly a review of the project design against relevant DPA guidelines, which is a technical review that can be performed at the staff level. The advisory design panel provides recommendations on DP conformance with DPA guidelines and general design prior to a DP being considered for approval. ADP's review and recommendations provide an additional layer of impartial review before a DP is approved. Removing the 400 square meter limit on non-residential space would expedite the delivery of employment space. Next, we'll be discussing the increase in delegation of the development variance permits, or DVPs. So staff are also recommending the delegated development permit criteria be increased. The current delegated DVP criteria is quite low and has resulted in most variance permit applications requiring council approval, which lengthens processing timelines. The following amendments on the slide to the delegated DVP criteria are proposed. For off-street parking spaces, increasing the allowable reduction from 10% to 20%, with a minimum reduction of 1 stall allowed, where a 20% reduction would result in less than 1 stall. For building setback regulations, increasing the allowable reduction from 25% to 50%. For building height regulations, increasing the allowable increase in height from 10% to 20%. Including a new criteria to vary the required shared open space for a project to reduce this requirement by 25%. Additional criteria would be added that would only support open space variances if the open space provided is sufficiently activated. Including a new delegated criteria to vary the number of principal or accessory buildings on a lot. The limit on the number of buildings per lot is likely outdated and could be removed entirely in some zones given the other siting controls. Including a new delegated criteria to vary the minimum lot width and depth in a zone for the purpose of a subdivision. Including a new criteria to vary the provisions in section 4.4 related to accessory buildings, including height, siting, and size of an accessory building. Increasing the eligible delegated variance criteria would allow more applicants to take advantage of this process No amendments are proposed to the existing general guidelines that staff must consider when deciding whether to approve a delegated development variance permit. There were 4 DVPs that were approved by council in 2024 and 2025. If the delegated criteria were expanded as recommended, one of those permits would have fallen under this new criteria. Since 2021, there have been 15 DVPs that were approved by council. 10 of those would have been delegated under this new criteria. The next recommendation is eliminating the 3-bedroom unit mix policy for rental projects. OCP policy 12.2D states that for projects seeking rezoning for residential development, at least 20% of the dwellings must be 3-bedroom units and at least 10% of the dwellings must be 1-bedroom units. Over the last 5 years, staff have repeatedly heard from applicants that this policy is particularly difficult to achieve for any form of rental project and all apartment types. Given that the reported rental vacancy rate in Squamish continues to be one of the lowest in BC, staff recommend more flexibility in the application of this policy for rezonings or DPs with variants that are securing units as residential rental tenure. Council could consider amending this policy as part of the larger 2028 OCP update, should challenging market conditions persist once that work is underway. The next recommendation is reviewing the landscape bond requirement. Currently, applicants are required to provide landscape bonding as part of a DP application to ensure the landscaping is completed in accordance with the approved landscape plans. The purpose of the bonding is to ensure a local government has sufficient funds to hire a contractor to complete the landscaping for the project if a developer does not. While to staff's knowledge, the district has never had to use landscape bonding to complete landscaping for a project. It acts as effective leverage to ensure the installed landscaping generally complies with the approved plans. Landscape bonding is paid with cash or letter of credit with the building permit issuance and is held until the landscaping on the project is completed. This can tie up the applicant's funds for a considerable period of time. In June 2025, the province amended the Local Government Act to extend installment periods for paying ACCs and DCCs and allow for the use of on-demand surety bonds as financial security for local governments. On-demand surety bonds are a financial guarantee from an insurer, promising to pay a security amount if a developer defaults on an obligation. This provides the same purpose as cash or a letter of credit, but does not tie up actual cash. As staff are in the process of setting up to accept surety bonds for ACC and DCC payments, staff are exploring whether this security option can be extended for landscape bonding as well. The next recommendation is property tax abatement for purpose-built rental projects. Current market conditions continue to be challenging for purpose-built rental projects. Should the adoption of the ACC and DCC bylaws move forward, costs for new projects will increase. Providing property tax abatement for new purpose-built rental projects would be one measure the district could explore, which would temporarily reduce operating costs associated with these projects. Property tax abatement for rental projects involves applying a revitalization tax exemption program via a bylaw adoption process. The community charter provides authority to exempt property from municipal property taxes. To use this authority, a council must establish a revitalization program and enter into agreements with property owners and then exempt their property from taxation once all the specified conditions of the program and the agreement have been met. Table 4 on this slide presents an example of a downtown rental project with 67 units and the RTE impact if it were applied. Staff are seeking council direction on interest in pursuing this action further before completing more detailed financial analysis on the implications of this proposal. Should council wish to explore this further, staff would need to scope out the potential terms of the program and return to a future committee of the whole meeting to update council. The final recommendation is supporting pre-zoning beyond what is required under Bill 44. Staff are currently working on the Garibaldi Estates Neighborhood Plan zoning bylaw update project, which seeks to pre-zone certain areas of the estates in accordance with the land use designations in the plan. This project aligns with the provincial directive to expand pre-zoned lands for long-term housing supply. Staff expect to start working on a density bonus system this year for securing affordable housing contributions as a standard zoning bylaw provision. This incentive, combined with infrastructure master plans and the ACC program, should allow the district to continue area-specific zoning updates in alignment with the OCP. So the engagement proposed as part of this project staff will inform UDI if council directs staff to proceed with any of the recommendations outlined in this report, and no additional engagement is proposed as part of this project. So staff have the following recommendation on the slide. And just a note for the chair, it would be helpful if kind of each item could be discussed, so there's perhaps consensus. And maybe one recommendation that you can choose to take or leave is discussing item A last, as I suspect this might generate the lengthiest discussion, but I'll leave that with the chair.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. We're on to questions now from council. Councillor Stoner will start us off.
Thank you. Through the chair, as I read your report, the issue isn't actually permit issuance. It's the fact that folks can't get the financing that they need to get through to construction. So I appreciate that permitting timelines can impact that to some degree, but how do we expect any of these measures to actually address the issue of general markets, global markets, national markets? Like, why does any of this move the dial? Or how do we expect it to move the dial?
Through the chair, perhaps I will take a stab at answering this initially and then defer to Jonas if he has anything to add. So these recommendations are based on what levers the district can kind of pull to assist with this. Obviously, there's nothing we can do about those other markets that you mentioned, but permitting timelines are consistently something that is brought to the district's attention from developers and local builders. And these recommendations are essentially looking for ways to make this a more efficient process and speed it up, as this is one of the tools that we can use to help facilitate this.
Absolutely. And I agree, it's always important to do process improvement. So what data do we have around how long it's taking for our permits to get through our process, where the biggest holdups are, how many times they're changing hands between the district and the applicants? Like, what is informing that these are the best moves to take in terms of improving our development process?
Through the chair, I mean, each project is different. There can be a number of conditions that applicants, because each project is unique and there can be different conditions applied to DP or rezoning. It can be kind of a lengthy time for an applicant to satisfy these requirements, depending on what they are and what the project is. So if there's opportunities to reduce the kind of amount of time to get to meeting those conditions, that is what staff are recommending is kind of the lowest hanging fruit for attempting to streamline this process. And obviously, the faster things go, the lower the costs for interest and holding and things like that are. So it is hard to comment on specifically, because each project can vary so wildly in their approval in town. But this is kind of where we're at as far as recommendations. I don't know if either of you have anything to add.
Thank you, through the chair. Jonas Wilnischke, Senior Director of Community Development. I think some of these measures are aimed not just saving time in our process, but saving on costs, in recognition that the DCCs are going up significantly this year for new projects. So every time we know that the district costs are going up on development, we always look for opportunities. Okay, is there something that we're doing that is not critical that could provide a buffer to those cost increases?
I appreciate that feedback. And I absolutely agree that there's probably elements of our policy that are adding cost. I'm just not sure I fully want to rely on UDI, although they're a good partner and an important partner in getting things built, as policy, professional policy or strong policy policy experts on District of Squamish policy. And so I'm curious, from a staff perspective, how do we weigh what UDI has submitted versus what we actually know are potentially some of the hangups in our process? Like, we know our process best. What I see here is a response from UDI to UDI, but no other input from other developers, from council who's seen this back and forth, from staff as like, oh, we've done a review of the 15 different DPs that we've received in the past year, and here's where the longest holdup was. So I'm just curious why staff are only relying on the feedback that UDI has provided and not on a comprehensive review of our development application process.
Thank you through the chair. Largely, we are continuously reviewing our processes. While the UDI letter is attached and it is the only formal engagement that has been done to this time, we have informally been engaging with all developers who are, for example, stuck within the building permit process and unable to pick up their permits. As part of our agreement with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation Housing Accelerator Fund, they are continually asking us to work with developers to get them to pick up their permits. And again, with the delegation criteria, we've done a separate review that we anticipate bringing to council later on about where we're not seeing efficiencies through that process, and that's largely within the delegated development variance permit, and again with the delegated development permits that have mixed use. So those are things that we were able to both we heard from other developers within the process that weren't necessarily represented through UDI, and as well as UDI. I guess I'd also add, just like in terms of like the 3-bedroom requirement is something we hear from all applicants from the beginning of the process to the end. 3 bedrooms in apartments typically make it more difficult to secure financing as they sell for a similar price to townhouses and are harder to convert, or at least this is what we understand from our conversations with both developers and UDI, who sometimes are the same and sometimes different.
If I could just add, also, we did a scan of what's happening in other jurisdictions, in larger jurisdictions in Metro Vancouver, and some of the recommendations are in line with what we're seeing elsewhere. We sometimes lack capacity to undertake a bigger project, looking at our process. So, sometimes it's good to see what's happening in Metro Vancouver area and kind of cherry pick things that could be that staff think are applicable in Squamish to save time.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, I see your hand, and I'll get to you in a moment. And Councillor Hamilton is also on my list. Next up, Mayor Herford, please.
Thank you. Specifically on the 3-bedroom unit mix, on this list, actually, overall on this list, we have increasing delegation. I think that was quite thoughtful, that piece of the discussion, and we'll get to that. But it had some analysis, and the reviewing the landscape, that's a review, exploring, all that language. This one just has eliminating. And I understand that the percentages might be challenging, but it feels like a very binary recommendation or suggestion. Can you comment on that? I was looking through our housing needs reports trying to understand like unit types a bit more, but it's hard to really it didn't really necessarily jump out at me. So can you comment on the need for the three bedrooms, how that's articulated, and how we're suggesting not a reduction in the percentage or bonusing if they get that, or some other way to facilitate the 3-bedroom construction and just eliminating it? It seems I'm just having a hard time reconciling that.
Through the chair. So perhaps this wasn't articulated well in the report, but the intention is that the policy would still live in the OCP, but would be applied less rigidly going forward to council. So if a project, is proposing 100% rental, and there's a variance, and then that policy becomes applicable, and they aren't achieving that, then the rationale would be provided in the staff report as to why that policy is not being met for that, and kind of like a reminder to council that, perhaps this should not be applied as rigidly. So that's sort of the intention about applying this policy going forward. And this is kind of like the initial touch point with council to discuss, whether that is something that staff should pursue further or not. So essentially it's more highlighting that it wouldn't be applicable to these rental projects, or perhaps, an apartment project where the developer is stating that, the numbers don't work if they meet this policy, and provide the associated rationale for staff to share with council.
Just a follow-up on this. Yeah. Okay. I just see that. Thank you for that more context there. I think that kind of feeds into point A around the delegation piece and how we would manage that and what that expectation is. If we delegate on using the percentages that you've the criteria that was laid out in the report, then this piece would just be seen as a variance, or would this being varied automatically come to council because of the OCP policy element? Or just how does that work? I want to make sure we really understand what we're delegating, because that what you just explained didn't jump out at me in your description or the report on the delegated piece of point A.
Sure. So through the chair, typically this policy, it becomes applicable if there is a rezoning application, or, as you know, a development variance permit. So if you had a former character DP that was seeking some kind of variance, then this we typically would apply this policy. Obviously, rezonings are different than what we're discussing with delegated DPs and variances, so I won't touch on that. But I suppose the delegated DVP criteria is still meant to be sort of capturing minor variances. The increase is to sort of reflect how zoning has changed since they were first implemented. Lots of setbacks have been reduced since that time, so the smaller reductions that were initially delegated aren't really that applicable anymore, because you can't really vary. And 10% of a small setback is almost nothing. So the intention was to try to bring it more in line with our current zoning regulations. And then I suppose if a project was going through a delegated DVP criteria, it would likely be a minor, not seeking a major variance. So I guess it would be up to staff discretion about whether this policy would be applicable or not. And then given the current market conditions, what we're hearing from applicants, obviously applying this policy to smaller projects, whether it was going to council or not, would likely be challenging for someone to meet.
Councillor Stoner had a follow up on this.
Yes, I'm just curious how that varies from what we currently have. Like the 3-bedroom policy is a policy in the OCP. Staff at any point can bring forward, in alignment with the application and the applicant, a rationale as to why we might consider varying that policy. So how is it different than what we're currently doing?
Through the mayor, this is more kind of highlighting that staff, highlighting to council that there might need to be more flexibility in the application of this policy, and sort of starting that conversation at this table, and making it starting this discussion here and highlighting that there does maybe need to be more flexibility, and seeing if council is willing to kind of move forward with that.
If I could just add, it gives staff more certainty in discussing with applicants at the pre-application stage what they might expect in council. Essentially, now we just go by example. We identify different projects and how things have gone versus having some direction from council.
Mayor Herford.
I'm thinking about we're sort of at a point in time where there's challenging market conditions for all sorts of reasons. I'm reflecting back when we relaxed an energy step code piece on rental buildings, and we saw an uptick. Given that we have a big lag time outside of our process in these things happening, and all this work is aiming to shorten that up, if at this point in time things are approved, that would be a DP, I guess, that has a 2-year expiration date. So it's really a point in time piece, and we're not going to sort of step back from securing these broadly, like in perpetuity. It's a point in time, and it's that expiration of the DP that is the stopgap that ensures that it actually happens. Because I think there's an interest in facilitating in a reasonable way, but is that the mechanism? Is the expiration of the DP?
Yeah, through the chair. So that would be, once a development permit is approved, as you mentioned, there's 2 years issued. There's a difference. There's DPs are approved by council, which often contain a number of conditions. Once those conditions are met, then the DP goes for signing and approval. And from that date, there's 2 years to start construction. So should an applicant not start construction within 2 years that it's been issued, then the permit would lapse and they would need to start anew. There's no guarantees on the zoning or anything that was previously agreed to once the DP expires.
Councillor Hamilton, and then I'd like to hear from Councillor Pettingill after that.
Yeah, thanks very much, staff. I'll focus my first questions just on the increase in delegated DP criteria and delegated DVP criteria. So it had me reflecting on why DPs need to come to council at all. So maybe from a general planning perspective, can you help give me some insight as to why DPs need to come to council? What are we doing? What are we losing when we delegate that authority to staff?
Through the chair, I think I will start by speaking to the legislation and then perhaps defer to my manager or director to finish. So the Local Government Act requires that a council approve a development permit per the legislation. It also gives the authority to delegate it to staff. So it doesn't provide any guidance on what that delegation level is. So council could delegate all form and character DPs if that was their wish. Would you guys like to expand on this further?
Through the chair, it is an odd situation, and I don't believe it's the same across the country. But it is a situation in BC that's been like this for years. The odd piece is that it is a permitting process, and so if you meet all the requirements in the bylaw, you need to get the district has to issue a permit, and then it has to go through a council political process, which is it's an oddity.
So that confirms to me that it's the council process that is the inefficiency when all criteria are met. Yeah, I've in this chair, I've sat many times thinking, okay, well, all the criteria are met. I don't even know why I'm like it doesn't feel like it's a process whose conclusion is given by the permit regulations. So our role as council seems to be more effective in spending our time deciding whether those goals and regulations are correct and allow staff to do the DP, check each project. So would staff consider increasing the number of units, that minimum number of units beyond 50 to maybe 100 units, or no limit on the number of units required, residential units required? Why 50 and why not maybe 100 or 200 units?
Through the chair, I can speak to why 50 was landed on. Obviously, it's currently at 20, so going to no limit at all would seem quite bold. 50 is kind of the initial starting point that staff thought might be palatable for council to consider. But obviously, that is another reason why we are here today. If council feels that they don't need to see form and character DPs for the reasons you articulated, then that's certainly at your discretion. That the council gets to set the delegated limit, and until recently there was very few permits that were delegated before the existing criteria.
And if I could just add, 50 would capture a lot of medium-sized projects. So then if that's the threshold, council would more likely see just the larger projects at DP stage.
But on the commercial side or on the non-residential side, staff are comfortable with no limit there. So what's the difference between the residential and the non-residential that leads staff to have that confidence in the non-residential no limit?
Through the chair, in inexperience processing applications, I've had a project myself that was referenced in the staff report where they met the delegated criteria of 20 units for residential units, but exceeded the employment space. And there was kind of discussions with that applicant about where they were considering reducing the employment space to meet the delegated criteria to achieve that efficiency. Given the desire for employment space in town, staff felt it was reasonable to remove that limit. So because there are probably situations where an applicant, might be a little bit over the delegated criteria for an employment space and then choose to reduce it to try and achieve an efficiency. So staff are looking for ways to support the delivery of employment space. So eliminating that number seemed reasonable. And for the residential piece, Mr. Vilaniskis spoke to the rationale for that as medium-sized projects.
Apologies. The business park is where we see most of our commercial or industrial type development, light industrial, and 100% of that space is delegated. So that's, that is kind of an island where it's all delegated now. And it would just make sense expanding that and having it consistent.
And one more for this round. On the topic of increasing the delegated DVP criteria, this is a space where it's not clear to me that increasing the delegation is actually going to result in speeding things up or making things more efficient. And here's my concern or rationale here. When we create a gray zone, the delegated or a DVP is a gray zone, right? It's you want to change something a little bit. We create a space where either staff and council need to negotiate what acceptable changes actually are. And that creates inefficiencies for everybody because more flexibility or more gray zone will lead to more negotiation, will lead to more uncertainty for applicants. So here's a situation where it seems to me like reducing that variance, reducing an applicant's desire to vary seems to me to be a more efficient path forward. They can choose a completely delegated process and be within the permit guidelines, or choose the less certain process that's going to cost them more money because it's less certain. So how am I seeing this? What is staff seeing differently than I am in this delegated DVP space?
Through the chair, expanding the criteria allows the opportunity for more folks to take advantage of it. Obviously, larger development applications do see variances in them, but I would say the large majority of DVPs are just kind of homeowners or folks trying to build an addition on their house and they have an oddly shaped lot. And allowing more flexibility in this space would allow more folks to take advantage of this. And while there may be some negotiations, as you suggested, if they fall within this criteria, if they fall within the delegated variance criteria and they meet the decision criteria that staff have that is identified in the bylaw, there's not a whole lot of negotiation that goes on. Say you want a 4 meter, if it worked under the thing and it didn't impact the neighbors and the other specific criteria, then that would be recommended for approval. So it's not quite as gray.
Council, just a reminder, please, through the chair, we're not debating with staff. We're asking questions at this point.
Okay. And I think this is then a comment to council following up on that. I think a clearer path forward, if these are things that we accept and we want, like if it's okay for somebody to go 10% over the setback, then we should change our setbacks. We should change the rules so that they meet the criteria and the needs of the people who are doing these things rather than increasing the gray zone. So that's my concern and my reflection on this DVP criteria piece.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, you're up next. I don't have anybody else on my speaker list at this point, and we did budget to finish this up at 11:15, so 4 minutes from now. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I've got a few things. So in many ways, I'm on side with Councillor Hamilton. I think in some of those last comments, for me, and I know there's things around hardship and so on too, we try to consider with guidelines and variances. But for me, those so-called hardships are considered in the property price typically. And I think we are facilitating and encouraging a system where developers push for variances and we get into these things as opposed to here's the zoning, build to it, hardships was in your already accounted for in your property costs and so on. And so I think I would, if there are things that we need to tweak in our zoning and so on, then we should do it. I think in terms of delegation, I would want a review of our DPA guidelines first. I find that they are subjective, and I'll just, I pulled up an example. Pedestrian cycling routes should provide internal and safe and efficient connectivity. Those are both quite subjective ideas. Should consider separated pedestrian cycling routes. So consider what is sufficient. I think my experience in the last couple things where we've gone through this is that council, or at least I have not felt like guidelines have been sufficiently met. Staff has asserted they are, but there's subjective things like this. I know guidelines are not hard, but you can have objective guidelines like what is the width of a pedestrian access route, or what are the angles, and still make it not a hard requirement. And so for me, I think to increase the delegation, especially with the significant amount of Bill 44 changes and all the other changes we've rolled out, I would want a little more work on our DPA guidelines. And I've even heard, I think, from some of my colleagues comments that they weren't quite sure they agreed that the guidelines have been met, but didn't want to sort of go contrary to staff's assessment that they had been met. And so things were supported, but I don't think there was a unanimous feeling that guidelines had been set. And so I think some ongoing council review until the guidelines are tweaked is important. I just want to check then, switch to the 3-bedroom housing. The current policy says dwellings must be 3-bedroom, 20% of dwellings must be 3-bedroom units. So it's a must. So I guess my question is staff proposing as part of this that the OCP is updated? Because my understanding is we can't vary or update a bylaw contrary to the OCP. And so because that must language is in there to relax this 20% requirement, it would require an OCP update. Is that correct?
Through the chair, not necessarily. Obviously, there's a number of OCP policies in there. If a project generally conforms with it's similar to the DPA guidelines. If it's generally conforming, it wouldn't be offside. And staff aren't recommending amending this policy in the near term. It would be explored during the overall OCP update. So that would also give time to see how the market conditions are faring when that overall update is happening. Again, this would just be kind of reviewing it on a case-by-case basis and recommending that it not be met if it was warranted.
Okay, I might need a bit more learning then on the OCP, because my understanding was that the requirements to comply with the OCP, especially when there's must language, is a little bit tighter. So take that offline. Do we know then if we're considering going down this road, like I understand maybe developers could find people that are willing to buy up just exclusively single family investors, whoever it is. But in terms of a complete community, do we have a lessened need for these 3-bedroom units? Or is there a thought that if we pull them out of apartments, because I think I heard that this was an issue for apartments, that we would increase the requirement for, say, townhomes to have 3-bedroom?
Through the chair, the recommendation associated with this policy is just reviewing it on a case-by-case basis at this time. It's been in place since the OCP has been adopted, so staff have been applying it unless it was not applicable. And for now, the recommendation would be to, if a 100% rental apartment project came forward and it wasn't feasible to do so, then staff would explain that in the staff report when it's being considered by council.
So if I understand, though, that sort of might make an individual project more viable, but it results in a net amount of 3-bedroom less than 20%, but the need is still presumably at least 20%. So would we not want to change the language so that if we, allow 1 or 2 projects to go lower, that it sort of raises the bar for subsequent projects, so we're hitting a net 20% number? Or do we feel that we don't actually need the same volume of 3-bedroom units in aggregate?
Through the chair, one thing to consider is that with the Bill 44 updates, that allows multiple unit dwellings on almost every, or in the largest zones in town. And those are typically going to be 3-bedroom units in kind of townhouse form. So there is an opportunity, and none of those would go to council for consideration because they do not have a DP requirement. So I suppose unless they were seeking some sort of variance, it would not be something the council sees. Same with, single family home, single unit dwellings. Those are typically 3-bedroom units. So there is, a lot of kind of pre-zoned availability for 3-bedroom units. And so when staff are looking at individual development applications when they're applying this policy, it's not necessarily going to result in a net loss because there's a lot of zone capacity to provide 3-bedroom townhouses throughout the town.
Okay,
If I could just
guess
just quickly adding on the 3-bedroom question is because we're proposing to revisit this at the OCP update stage, we are going to run a housing needs assessment and another housing needs assessment just before that OCP process gets going. And I think that will be the opportunity to see where we're at with 3 bedrooms and what we need to do in terms of policy in the OCP.
Okay, I guess my comment is I wouldn't want to sort of remove this requirement without a clear understanding that this can be relaxed and we don't need the 3 bedrooms and or that we are maintaining this policy in aggregate, even if we're varying it on single projects. Would say the landscape bonding thing that I read in the report seems to make sense. Temporary property tax abatement, I would say for non-market rental maybe, but I don't see it necessarily for market rental, or I'd need some more understanding there. And I would just say at a high level, I am very resistant to the idea that we try to, other than the housing targets, I don't see a reason why we would try and make developers whole in the context when banks are requiring 15% profit for financing. It seems they're doing quite well, and that's where I think there needs to be movement. I don't think we should be sort of building things that don't make sense for the long-term sustainability of our community to deal with the short-term markets and banks wanting 15%. I think in many cases it makes sense to actually build less when you're able to get less for the community or sort of offset the impact of that development for the community. When you can have better offsets, then it makes sense to open the floodgates and have development go and see those benefits for the whole community and the new people coming. And so I'm sort of really challenged that we would I feel like we've done a lot with Bill 44 and all the other changes, and I would kind of like to see them flow through. And I'm not really compelled to sort of break our backs to deal with some of these things that I think we've done more than our part. And so, yeah, I'm somewhat resistant to some of these changes right now in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pettingill. You've, I think, taken us quite nicely into comments. My sense is you still have questions? We haven't heard from Councillor Anderson. You indicated and then waved off. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Just on the DVP conversation, can staff clarify how many DVPs in 2024 and 2025 would have met the delegated criteria as proposed?
1.
And I'm curious what the average landscape bondage is for projects.
Through the chair, they vary drastically project by project. I would say probably smaller ones, you're looking at $10,000 to $30,000. Medium could be 50 to 100, and then larger ones, that, for example, that university DP that was presented a few weeks ago, that was in the millions of dollars. So it really depends on the scope of the project.
Okay, that's helpful. And then just a quick question around table 2, which was the housing starts by year. There was a very specific note that said it didn't include demolitions. I'm just wondering if staff have the data around how many units were demolished over that same time, over those 3 years.
Thank you, through the chair. In 2025, part of the reason it wasn't included is we're still going through our data as we report to CMHC, but we had 12 demolitions in 2025. Our 2024 data, it looks like it was either 17 or 23. We're still going through that to verify it. And in 2023, there were 9 demolitions. And that's just of residential units.
Thank you for that clarity. And then my last question was, just at a high level, can staff just provide like what are the steps between DP approval, DP issuance, and then BP approval? So like where does servicing agreement happen? I'm just trying to better understand like where are the crunch points in the process that we have?
Through the chair, so a permit, we'll go with one that needs council approval. So it's say council approves a DP subject to conditions. The next steps would be the applicant needs to meet those conditions before they are issued. At the same time, they could submit their servicing agreement application. This needs to be, and building permit application. The servicing agreement needs to be completed prior to building permit issuance. And then the applicants would need to meet any deficiencies that were identified in their servicing agreement or building permit application before those are issued. So they kind of work through comments provided by staff. And then once those are ready to issue, the servicing agreement would be issued and then the building permit would be issued. And at that time, the applicant would pay their landscape bonding and then any other related development fees such as ACCs and DCCs if they're applicable.
And so then just at a high level, a few weeks ago at Committee of the Whole, we had engineering staff come forward with the ongoing work that's happening with the subdivision control bylaw, which I think has the most impact on servicing agreements. Have planning staff, been involved in that process, and how much opportunity we think there is to actually just expedite our development application process through reviewing our servicing agreements and our subdivision control bylaw? Because that's often what I hear is one of the biggest hangups in our process.
Through the chair, perhaps I will start and allow you guys to jump in. So I think, in my experience, one of the challenges has been for applicants that, when you're going through the DP process, I think if there's some uncertainty related to how long the approval is going to take or if it's going to be approved, there's hesitation to invest in civil design and things like that, which is fair. But then that, their design might not be as far along as it ideally would be in the servicing agreement process. So that can lead to a lengthening of the servicing agreement process. And then obviously I'm not very familiar with the intricacies of the details of that bylaw, but perhaps I would imagine that engineering is looking at making that more efficient and more clear so there's less confusion when applicants are submitting. So that's sort of, I can speak to what I have experienced where, developers may not want to advance their design for relevant reasons, but would either of you like to speak to the overall development efficiency?
Through the chair, I think that you're correct in that once a development permit is approved and before it's issued, applicants tend to refocus on other things like the servicing and the building permit requirements, because they know that this process, especially if it's council process, it's a big milestone for them to pass. And then they have to catch up on everything else, as well as range financing. The other thing we see a lot is applicants before they get that development permit issued, that's when they, after approval and before issuance, they go out looking for financing for the project. And I think that engineering is doing a lot of work on defining what the servicing in what area will be, which is usually our biggest time lag for applicants to figure out how to plug into our system and where the issues might be. So I don't know if it's strictly a servicing agreement issue or more of having, for instance, in around downtown, having streetscapes designed, pre-designed, so that we know exactly, and developers know exactly what they need to do.
Okay, and then just for further clarity in the staff report, it says in 2024, 8 residential DPs were approved and 4 in 2025 that were brought forward to council, and only one of these approved permits has proceeded to building permit. Do we have an understanding of whether the proposals as presented here in the recommendation from staff would get any of those other 11 permits over the line?
Through the chair, no, not certain. However, potentially they could have, if the process was quite a bit faster, that might have, pushed these projects to get started under a more favorable economic climate. Obviously, things kind of seem to be deteriorating rather than improving. So, but we not for sure.
And I'll just finally add that surety bonds, on-demand surety bonds, is what we hear a lot from developers as a new tool that they want to use because it does actually free up their capital. So that is something we're looking at: landscape bonding as well as servicing agreement securities.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pettingill, is that a legacy hand or is it new?
It's new. I did.
It's new. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Make it fast, please.
And sorry, I lost track of the various counts, but in the stuff that has been delegated, does staff have a sense of what portion of those we've secured no gas covenants as part of the request for variances and so on?
Through the chair, one of the criteria for considering a delegated DVP is entering into a no gas covenant. So if those weren't kind of highlighted in this analysis because those are already delegated, but that is an existing criteria. So that would apply if the delegated DVP criteria was expanded. So theoretically, it would apply to more projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council, we're well over time by almost 15 minutes at this point. Mayor Herford has indicated to me that he's got a motion in mind. I want to make sure that whatever we do, we provide staff with the feedback that they're looking for through this recommendation. Mayor Herford, what have you got for us?
Thank you. I just suggest that we do this one piece at a time so we can be clear with the direction and not. And I'm going to take the lowest hanging fruit, which to me seems like advancing a staff recommendation on item C, reviewing the landscape bonding requirements. And if it's second, I'll speak to it. This Councillor Hamilton, second. So just briefly, there's new tools available that don't diminish the security or and don't introduce risk to the district, and I'm fully supportive of exploring using those to the most responsible extent. So I'm happy to see this piece move forward, and I'll leave my comments there for now.
Okay, I just want to check with our minute taker. Are you clear on what this motion is? Correct. Councillor Stoner is second. Councillor Stoner, comments?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I too will support this. I think it makes good sense as we're reviewing it with the ACC and the DCC bylaw. If there's a new tool that's available that would actually impact the ability for projects to manage their cash flow and have real impact on delivering the units that we know our community needs, then I'm happy to support that. So I'll support this element of the recommendation.
Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll also support this aspect of the landscape bonding recommendation. And the core purpose of my support here is that I absolutely believe we should be removing barriers that of costs to developers and challenges for them to move forward. Those barriers that don't actually result in us increasing benefits to our community. And the surety bonding appears to be a way that we can still assure the community benefit while reducing the cost to the developer. So that's a win in my case, in my book. Thanks.
Are there any other comments? Mayor Herford, thanks for picking this low-hanging fruit. I completely agree with you, and I support this motion. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Mayor Herford, have you got another one for us?
I do. And it would be that item A come back to a future meeting with all of the inclusive of all the criteria for the guiding principles for staff's delegated responsibility under the delegation bylaw currently for consideration.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Yes, seeking clarity.
Can
Councillor.
the mover please explain what they mean?
No, that's a fair question. Thank you. Well, just in the discussion on this point, there's a lot of discussion around what the rationale would be to provide variance. We heard Councillor Pettingill inquired about the no gas covenant. It was clear that that was to be included. But I think that knowing what that criteria is and really making sure that we have there's one, being supportive of the principle, but one, really to make sure that we understand what pieces are being applied. So I'm looking for that piece that was missing today. I don't think we're going to get, this is the most constructive motion I could come up with this topic without debating ins and outs of it with what I feel is not the complete piece that I would need to make a decision on the matter.
Okay, so the actual wording of this motion is a little out there.
Okay, should I try again?
Please do.
Okay, that item A come back to a future meeting with for further consideration, and at that time have is it a staff policy? So I'm just going to pause what is that document called that staff would look towards? So we'll make sure we're using the same.
It lives in the land development procedures bylaw. There's a number of criteria that staff need to consider when considering a delegated DVP.
So that the delegated DVP criteria come back to. That item may come back to a future meeting. And it was the delegation, but sorry, one more time.
The delegated criteria. I suppose you could just say with the bylaws drafted, because then you would have the entire.
Oh, there we go. With bylaws drafted. For consent.
Okay, that's definitely a lot more concise.
Thank you. And it's
so
still what I meant, but thank you.
it's moved by Mayor Herford and it's seconded by Councillor Anderson. Do you have comments, Councillor?
Just am in favor of Mayor Herford's approach, a more cautious approach with an opportunity for a little bit more elaboration and discussion. I did find that the accounting for council deliberation time, 130 minutes there, 120 minutes there, didn't really paint a picture for me that I would have wished. Thank you.
Councillor Penningale?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to support this as articulated, especially with bylaws being written. I would appreciate a further discussion and consideration, but I don't want to move to the bylaws. Again, for me, when I hear that this would have only applied to, I think I heard one application in the last year, the benefit to this isn't that clear. And there are things, again, to me, the subjectivity in our current DPA guidelines, or sort of expecting people to just build within the zoning or tweak the zoning so we're not into variances and so on. Those pass at this moment make more sense to me. And so be open to having a discussion to dig into those things a little bit more and see if we can work our way through it. But sort of not ready to just proceed too far as is without further council discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, followed by Councillor Greenlaw.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. I too don't think it's worth staff's time and energy to develop bylaws and further council consideration for delegation criteria on development variance permits. The numbers just don't make sense to me with that only having achieved or potentially reducing our council time by one application. And then more broadly, I may have been on side with the development permit delegation and maybe even considered increasing that criteria. But without a more fulsome review of understanding like what the actual benefits are going to be, there was a little bit of that in the staff report, but it didn't articulate maybe we do go to 100 because that would actually greatly streamline our process. It's really hard for me to say like that 50 is actually the right number. So I would have liked to see a little bit more analysis of our own process to better understand whether this is the right level of delegated criteria.
Councillor Greenlaw?
Yeah, I won't be supporting the motion either. Just standing in agreement with Councillor Stoner and Councillor Pettingill's comments. I don't see this being a major benefit to this body, but I also last week we were talking about the erosion of authority of municipalities, and I feel like this is kind of furthering down that slope from another direction. So I don't think it actually provides a lot of benefit to the people of Squamish to go down this road. And I also think that there needs to be more conversation to find out if there is a more effective way of going forward in this capacity.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks very much. I won't be supporting the motion, and that's because I think it's sort of maybe not in line with my council colleagues. I'm not sure, but it's to me, I see I actually don't need more information on this topic right now to give guidance. For me, I think that increasing the delegated DP criteria seems to be a sensible move, while increasing the delegated development variance permit criteria seems to be is something I would not support. So I don't personally need more information here, but if we were to move forward with a motion on this, I'd be calling for separating the delegated DP criteria with the delegated DVP criteria.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. And council, I'm going to ask all opposed. So that's Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Greenlaw, Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettingill, and Councillor French. This motion fails. Does anybody have an alternate motion? Councillor Hamilton.
I'm going to move that with the preamble and now Part A, increasing the delegated criteria for development permits. So that is excluding the variance component of the conversation.
Does Councillor Hamilton have a seconder on this motion? Mayor Herford is seconding. Councillor Hamilton, do you have anything further?
Yeah, thanks very much. Increasing the delegated DP criteria, this is really a question of where we put the line to what to delegate to staff. And I think if we have a clear line to delegate to staff, proponents know where that line is. They know when they can have a conversation with staff and when they'll need to come to council. And I think whether we have 20 units or 50 units, and I forget what the residential or the commercial limit is now, but to no limit, I don't think that's a significant cost to our community. I don't think we're going to be losing much community benefit, and it's going, I believe this will increase clarity for development projects to know when they will need to come to council for variance.
Mayor Herford.
Speaking in support of the motion, I think this makes good sense to me, and I think the most where I've through the conversation, it's the variance permits where the or the piece that has the most subjectivity and thus the most concern around the table in the discussion. But I'm happy to support this this piece going forward. I do think that we may the DPAs do continue to be like the crux of all this, but this is something we can do now and feels like a reasonable course of action.
Are there any other comments on this one? Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I won't be supporting this. As I stated, I feel like there's a gap between some of council, at least, and staff's interpretation of the guidelines, the DPA guidelines. And so I, as a first step, would want those reviewed and get us on a clearer, having those a little more objective than they are right now. And so when I also think about the number of applications that I've heard this would affect, it's quite small. And so again, I don't see a rush or the benefit in doing either of these things, rushing to do it. So yeah, I will not support this. Thank you.
Further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Pettingill, Councillor Greenlaw, and Councillor Stoner are opposed. This motion passes. Thank you. So council, that leaves us 3 items remaining. Are there anybody have any motions regarding any of these individually? Okay, we could simply proceed with the staff recommendation as a motion. Is there any interest in moving that way? Councillor Hamilton? Mayor Herford.
I'm going to move the staff recommendation for discussion. I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Okay, so this would be the staff recommendation with
The remaining
B, D, and E as our motion. Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand seconding that? Councillor Hamilton?
So if I could speak to it before.
I think Councillor Hamilton has a clarifying question. Okay,
Just-
go ahead.
Just
Mayor
a
Herford.
rationale here. I think it's important that we, even if we're not to support these, and I'm not supportive of these, that we have a clear vote and provide that direction rather than have them sit here on the agenda unaddressed by the group. So I think that so just briefly, the 3-bedroom unit mix, the way it's worded here, I think I could entertain this case by case, but the direction here I think feels more substantive than that. So I do think it's something that we need to be aware of, but that's as far as I think we need to go with it at this point in time. The property tax piece, we increased we've reviewed the DCC and the new ACC bylaw because we also are in challenging times as a municipality to provide the services we need for our community. And it's not a shell game where we move one load from one spot to another spot. We need to make sure that we are collecting the funds that we need to deliver services to the community. We just passed a budget that included a well north of 10% tax increase. And then we're looking at shifting the burden of development further onto the existing community. So I think that's not a concept I'm interested in at this point in time. I wrestled with item E. We're doing that work. We could sever that off and I could support continuing to do the work. That one's a bit of a wash for me, but I'd like us to, I will be voting against this, and I would support item E if it came out, but we're already doing that work. This seems like a bit of a strange piece to have in here, actually.
Councillor Anderson as the seconder to you. Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks. My question really was just clarity on, voting in support of this motion is not voting in support of all of these items, but it's asking staff to incorporate feedback. So I'll use this moment to give feedback. So regarding the delegation criteria for development variance permits, as I believe I communicated, I think that we should be reducing.
Sorry, just if I could, I only had B, D, and E. I was leaving.
Great, thank you. I'll comment on B, D, and E. That's fine. So I'm not supportive at this moment of eliminating the 3-bedroom mix requirement for residential rental tenure projects. I think that I'm not necessarily opposed to removing that from the OCP, but I think that conversation needs to happen. If we want to, the purpose of this kind of guideline is to generate a complete community, to put in policies, to put in a complete community. And I see tension between policy designed to develop a complete community and the notion of deciding things case by case. So I see tension between those two things, and I don't see how it's being resolved by removing it and adding this 3-bedroom criteria, the relaxation of the 3-bedroom criteria into a grayer zone, to a gray zone. On part D, I think I'm in alignment with Mayor Herford. I don't believe that temporary property tax abatements should be default for all rental projects. I think that for not-for-profit rental projects, I'm absolutely in favor of property tax potential of property tax exemptions. We do have a PTE process for that, which I think we can continue to use. Generally, from a principled point of view, I believe that if there are organizations, whatever the organization is, development, rental operators, if you're earning a profit within our community, you should be paying tax to contribute to the benefits of the community. Thanks.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to seek clarity, you moved the staff recommendation as presented, right? So we're just providing feedback. So it's not that we vote against this because we're just providing feedback.
I suppose, yeah.
Thanks for that clarity. So for feedback for the items as presented, I won't reiterate. I think I'm in line with my council colleagues. I also won't be supporting, I don't support including further review of any of these or further expansion. I think that there's a good policy and process in place if folks are looking to vary the 3-bedroom unit mix as presented in the OCP, and folks can bring that forward should they choose. The exploring temporary property tax abatement, I think, is a non-starter. As Councillor Hamilton just said, we have a permissive tax exemption process that allows us to do that for nonprofit rental buildings. And I'd only support continued pre-zoning if and when we have a proper affordable housing density bonus worked out, and that's still work that is ongoing. Without that, I think we just do our community, especially our future community, a disservice in providing land value, adding land value to landowners and not securing anything in exchange. Generally on this work, I feel like this is UDI throwing a bunch of things at the wall and just seeing what will stick, with some real hope that the ones at the bottom will stick. It is I'm a little bit frustrated because I don't think that when the 3 readings of the ACC and the DCC bylaw, anybody pulled the recommendation or the letter from UDI for further review. I don't think we moved for staff to act on it. I absolutely agree that there are opportunities for improving and reviewing our process, and I'm always up for process improvements. And I would love to chat with staff around opportunities for do that, how the Tempest system has improved our ability to better understand where the hiccups are in our processing system, or where the hangups are with our development partners and community. But that just unfortunately wasn't reflected in the information that was provided today. And well, again, I appreciate UDI taking some time to provide some feedback. I don't think that this is a comprehensive way to do a review of our own policy and process.
Councillor Pettingill, followed by Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks. And before I get too far, I just want to clarify, like, my understanding is the current motion is directing staff to move ahead with B, D, and E. We've sort of been speaking against it. So I think the thing we need to do is vote this down, and we are providing our rationale and our comments for why we're voting it down, because maybe there's subsequent work to revisit some of these things based on our comments. But I believe that is the impetus. If we vote for this, we're actually we're asking staff to proceed with this work. Is that correct?
Okay, Councillor Pettingill, voting it down creates a void where staff doesn't have direction. Mayor Herford, you've got a thought?
I'd like to check with our corporate officer. This is a bit of an odd one where it does say we provide the following feedback. We're providing feedback through comments, which isn't necessarily best practice. Maybe voting this down is better. I just want to make sure that I'm sorry if I introduced confusion with this.
That's okay. We can navigate this. I think that in this case, staff are going to take the feedback from council. It's a committee recommendation, so it isn't going on a regular business meeting agenda to be ratified. So staff are going to take the feedback from council from this motion if council votes in favor, and then address those comments accordingly. So if the comments unanimously from council on the table are that you don't want to move forward with the 3-bedroom units, then staff won't bring something forward related to that item.
And
Does
what
that
would the
make
difference
sense?
be if this was just defeated, making the same comments?
You could do that as well, and that it would be very clear that council directs staff not to move forward with the following items. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pettingill, does that help you out?
Yeah, so I will be voting against the motion then, and my comments are: one, for the 3-bedroom, I would want a better understanding of how we're offsetting any loss or clarity that we don't need that same level of 3-bedroom. Actually, as I listen to the discussion, the temporary property tax abatement for rental projects, there may be a case, but I think it's more around higher density rental and non-market, and maybe there's different rates for depending on the level of density. And I don't know with the revitalization laws what your flexibility is there, but we understand that higher density development tends to put lower cost impacts on linear infrastructure. So there may be and high density projects tend to subsidize the rest of the community on linear infrastructure. So maybe there is a rationale for this, but I think that requires a lot more work and analysis, and I don't think that's our highest priority right now. But if we were to proceed with that, I would want that information. And to be frank, on E, we are doing some of this I'm not clear. We didn't really get into the discussion on how exactly we would expand pre-zoning. And sorry, I just have lost track of that piece, and it doesn't seem to, because we are doing some pre-zoning, have been just working like crazy on Bill 44. I would want more clarity before saying yes, this is how we should increase pre-zoning. So I'm not ready to direct more work in that respect with the information I have. Thank you.
Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, I do think it's a bit problematic that we seem to be consistently lumping the affordability crisis in with the housing supply conversation. They are related but not interchangeable, and it has been roundly disproved that an increase in housing supply will lead to an increase in affordability. In fact, the opposite has been proven to be true over the past decade, and in no place is that more obvious than the Lower Mainland. My biggest concern with the rate of growth that we're experiencing is that we simply have not had the opportunity to properly assess if growth is paying for growth. And from 3 years of sitting in this chair and 8 years of living in this community, it is pretty clear to me that it is not, which is to say, if we are more lenient with our demands from developers, we are perpetually digging a deeper and deeper financial hole for our community. And we're already lagging behind in our service delivery according to our constituents in many amenities, including but not limited to recreation facility, arts and culture facilities, and from other orders of government, childcare, healthcare, education, highway, road upgrades. Which is to say, growth costs a significant amount more than we are currently paying as a municipality, province, or federal body. And which is also to say, to be frank, I think we would be doing a great disservice to the people of Squamish and to our future representatives to erode our powers around this table as an elected body and reduce income from developers, which it seems to me these requests are reflecting. Our current window represents what is likely to be the most active development period in our history and likely our future, and this is the opportunity to recover costs for growth. To my mind, what we're doing here, what's happening now is we're coming up against market conditions for a cyclical industry, and it cannot be incumbent upon a municipal body to bear the brunt of the national and international financial realities for the development industry. For the three-bedroom conversation, my understanding is that we need, not want, but need three-bedroom units. So I appreciate that this may be difficult for developers to meet, but this is the cost of development, and we need to keep this mandate. And perhaps it will warrant a review after we have a new housing needs report. But as Councillor Pettengill mentioned recently, we're striving for a community that is self-sustaining, that does not require people going, that is not a satellite city to Vancouver where people are going in and out of the town, which means families living and working here. And to do that, we need three-bedroom units. And further to that, with the affordability of what it is, we also require three-bedroom units to accommodate multiple adults living together. I'd like to echo some of Councillor Stoner's comments about being open to more pre-zoning conversations, like around the affordability and housing density bonuses. Yeah, that's what I have. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Greenlaw. Any further comments? So for me, eliminating the three-bedroom requirement is not supportable. And I think the problem here is the word eliminating, not necessarily the idea of making some change there. So the worry for me is that the future families of 4 or more will be cramming into two-bedroom apartments because there's a severe lack of larger bedroom units. So eliminating the three-bedroom requirement feels to me like we'd be allowing the development community to do the planning work that we're expected to do as policymakers. And so I expect that there's probably a sweet spot somewhere below our current expectation of 20% of three-bedroom units. And I'd like to have further conversation on that. Property tax abatement for new purpose-built rentals. I support pursuing this and encourage staff to complete the more detailed financial analysis on the implications that's mentioned in the report. So I don't necessarily want to take a stand on that issue here, but I do want to know more, and I would like that work to be done by council. And pre-zoning, seeing a lot of that already through Bill 44. I'll end my comments there. Council, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Opposed are Councillor Greenlaw, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettingill, and Mayor Herford. Despite the fact this doesn't really mean anything, the motion fails. Now, before I finalize this topic, staff, have we provided what you were looking for out of this session, or is there anything more you need from us before we move on? Staff have requested a 2-minute timeout, which I will grant after we have heard from Councillor Hamilton.
Something that staff may also contemplate. I'd like to put a motion on the floor regarding this conversation. It's clear that council, this is a topic of conversation for council. This is an important conversation for us. So the motion that I would like to put staff to consider the ramifications of in the 2 minutes, if they could do that. The motion would be that council directs staff to bring a cost estimate for an external performance audit of our development review process to council for consideration within the next 3 months.
I have a feeling that might extend the timeout a little beyond 2 minutes. Councillor Stoner also had a hand. Do you want to slide something in before staff leaves?
I was going to ask if it was possible to bring back the quarterly updates on their application, development application processes. So maybe staff can consider that in their timeout as well.
Okay, we are going to recess for 5 minutes. Five's good, 5 minutes. So we will be back here at, let's just call it 12:05. 5 after 12, we're back. Thank you very much for your patience, everybody. Returning from our break, I believe I am handing things over to Ms. Glende.
Thank you very much. Thank you, council or committee, for the timeout so staff could confer. In terms of the potential motions that council has indicated, specifically around getting a cost estimate and doing a development review in the next 3 months, given we're in the last stretch of council's term and we've just adopted the budget. To be candid, the answer is no, in terms of capacity and the ability to pivot work plans this year. It would be something that council could put forward for the next budget. And then in terms of bringing back the quarterly updates, Mr. Velaniskis will speak more to the current process and what would be needed in future, but it's not just a press of the button, unfortunately, despite having Tempest. It's quite a lift, which is why staff stopped doing it. And again, that just would take away from actually working on development applications, but Mr. Velaniskis can speak more to that.
Yeah, through the chair, just to add to what Ms. Glende said, it's cleaning up the data that we have in our Tempest system and making sure it's then publicly releasable. And that's almost a full-time job of a data analyst to help us make that data present in a presentable form. When we used to do it, staff would spend hours and hours going up through the spreadsheet and cleaning and making sure that everything's accurate. So it is a significant or not an insignificant lift for staff. And then I think the third item was whether we had everything we needed. We did. Thank you.
Okay, so just go ahead, Ms. Glende.
Thank you. Just to follow up as well on the request around, a cost estimate to review the development application process. It's important for council and the public to know that we have undertaken at an operational level review of both engineering and planning in terms of the organizational structure and processes. That's the extent to which I can share publicly because it does intersect with employees and human resources. But to give comfort that reviews are occurring at an operational level.
Okay, I saw a hand from Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Stoner. I saw yours as well. Through the chair, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. Through the chair, I'm concerned that perhaps my motion was not clear. It was not an expectation of that there would be an external performance audit completed in the next 3 months, is that we would receive a cost estimate within the next 3 months. And that is so that should council wish to put it on a future budget or consider it in the future, we will have the information available to us to do that.
Okay, and I suspect you want to test that motion. Before you do that, let's hear from Councillor Stoner, please.
Thank you. To my council colleague, I assume that was kind of the direction you're going. My recommendation, if you would entertain it, would be that you refer that to the next budget, because even if we get a budget estimate in 3 months' time, we can't really do very much with it until our next budget if we don't have a budget line item for it. So something for you to consider before you put a motion forward. My question to staff was appreciate and that there's a little bit of comfort there that there's continued process improvement. I guess my question is just what metrics, what metrics are we using to show that that is actually delivering on outcomes in terms of faster processing times, fewer back and forth between applicant and district? I'm just, from a governance perspective, I'm trying to understand how those process improvements are delivering on the outcomes that we are looking for as a council, as an organization, and as a community.
Our basic metric is people's ability to get to a building permit application and then the time that it takes to issue that application. And that's really the crunch time for development is when somebody applies for a building permit, they have to deal with all of our requirements and prove them out. And what we're reported in this phase is that the external factors are the leading issue right now, rather than the internal district factors. We seem to have I think our process reasonably in line, and we've worked out the bottlenecks we used to have. Some of the council members might remember that. So that is really the ability to get through our process in a certain amount of weeks.
So we have that data around time, I suspect data around back and forth. Can that be brought back to council?
Yes, we could bring that back in our next procedures bylaw update report.
Do you need a motion to that effect?
It's up to council whether you want to give us a motion.
So the answer is generally yes. Councillor Pettingill, I see your hand there. Before I get to Councillor Hamilton, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to try not to get too far offside, but from some of the comments I've heard, I understand there might be some complexity in pulling out of our current systems something that we can share with the public and removing confidential information, so on and so forth. Am I correct in understanding, though, that internally staff do have insight into a number of open, sort of paused projects and how long they're taking at each stage, that sort of thing that is available in a dashboard or reporting of some sort to staff that's being used, or are we sort of still working through Tempest to get some of this sort of thing working?
Through the chair, could you clarify the question, Councillor Pettingill?
Well, I guess I thought what Councillor Stoner had originally asked for, or what I was hearing, was a report that sort of showed, what projects there are, what stage they're at, how long they've been in each stage, and so on and so forth. I think the answer I heard was that, there something like that would require a fair bit of cleanup to be able to make it public. And I think that's understandable given where we are with our systems. But I want to sort of understand if internally staff has access to that sort of information, so you can still make decisions based on how long things are taking at what stage, and have that insight to our processes. Or are we still sort of working on some of those process and reporting stuff for internal reports as well?
Through the chair, there's a lot of qualitative information that, in terms of process and progress in when it comes to development. No application really goes officially on pause, but staff who work with the applicants know kind of, judging by the pace that they've been moving and the feedback we're getting and how fast that's coming. So there's a lot of just very qualitative knowledge that we have that's not really quantifiable, I think, to what council's expectation is here.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. I think that staff's feedback on the notion of their consideration of this external performance audit. And I absolutely recognize that 3 months is way too short a timeline to actually do this, and that it will take time. I also recognize Councillor Stoner's suggestion that this is potentially for implementation within our next budget cycle. I'm also aware that unless we ask for it, it won't be a line item in our next budget cycle. And so I'd rather allow staff the time, instead of making this thing a rush, give staff the time to do this properly. And so I'll put this motion on the floor, that council directs staff to bring a cost estimate for an external performance audit of our development review process to council within the next 3 months. For clarity, it is the cost estimate that is to be delivered within the next 3 months, not the performance review.
Ms. Glende.
Thank you through the chair. Before this motion is seconded and for consideration, appreciate the clarity on what's expected in the next 3 months. And it is important for council to consider that this is work as well. And it is not currently in the work plan. It is not currently in the strategic plan. Not to diminish its value, but staff's preference would be it would be referred to the next strategic plan. But that's just for council consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glende. Is there a seconder for Councillor Hamilton's motion? You're seconding that, Councillor Greenlaw? Anything further, Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks very much. And regarding our strategic plan, I think this falls very squarely into the reliable service delivery, delivering efficient and effective municipal services for residents and businesses today and into the future. This is not a criticism of staff. I know that staff try to have processes and processes that are efficient, but sometimes we can take an outside eye and improve our processes through an outside eye. Sometimes that outside eye can provide external confidence to others. All of those things are very important and valuable in the process, and I'd like to understand how much it will cost to get that secondary viewpoint.
Councillor Greenlaw?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree that it could be a good way to have just increased accountability and transparency.
Councillor Stoner?
I'd like to amend the motion or propose an amendment, which would be to strike within the next 3 months and add for the next, referred to the next budget.
Is there a seconder? Mayor Herford seconds. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
As previously mentioned, I think that this is a worthwhile discussion to have. I appreciate staff's feedback that it's not, well, it is, I agree, aligned with our strategic plan. It's not currently in the tactics that we have identified as key pieces of work for the next 3 to 6 months. And I think that this deserves a more fulsome discussion within a budget discussion around whether this is where this council and future council wants to allocate resources, although I do very much agree that it's probably a worthwhile endeavor.
Mayor Herford?
Yeah, thank you. I'm supporting this amendment. I think this would be the appropriate place for the discussion, and we've heard that even addressing the cost estimate for that consideration is work in and of itself. So when we do refer something to the budget process, it does trigger the work. So I think having this come with budget at budget time makes good sense to me. I'm still on the fence about supporting the main motion, but this amendment makes it more supportable.
Councillor Pettingill on the amendment.
Yeah, I think the timing makes sense, and it sounds like from Councillor Stoner's motion that she mentioned, there may be we may not have all the information of an external review, but a little bit better sense of where we are performance-wise to some degree, which I think will really inform how far I would feel we need to go down this road. And so I'd kind of like to see that piece first. I think having that information in hand and having this cost information at the budget time, to my mind, gives us the everything we need to make sense of this, and the timeline to a little more room to actually get a reasonable cost estimate done. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton on the amendment, followed by Councillor Anderson.
On the amendment, I won't be supporting the amendment because my reasoning, I don't see why 3 months is not a reasonable timeline to have a cost estimate of a piece of work. I don't see, and perhaps I don't recognize or perhaps I'm not seeing how much work that actually is to get a cost estimate for it. And the reason why I'm hesitant or not in favor of deferring it to budget time is that we have a lot of conversations. There are a lot of things to talk about during budget times, a lot of them major capital projects. And so a relatively small line item like this, I think will get washed away in those larger conversations.
Councillor Anderson.
I could actually speak to the main motion, but I'll make my comments here regarding the concept of bringing an outside eye. I feel we already have an outside eye involved, and that is the provincial government. And I feel that sometimes they don't see what they need to see, and sometimes they're not very well targeted. I also see an outside eye to some extent in the comments of or observations of the Urban Development Institute. I recognize that there are local members that are involved and have been involved in the communications we've received from them, but sometimes maybe they're not so well targeted either. And on the other hand, I'm impressed with the elaboration that I've heard from staff today on their engagement with the development community beyond what is already in our report, and also with their account of the exchange with other municipalities and the checking in with what's going on elsewhere. So I'm satisfied with where we are right now without that concept of an outside eye and putting that into place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in as well. I tend to agree with Councillor Hamilton. I think 3 months is an adequate period of time to have a cost estimate. I appreciate that ideally these things happen during the budget season as part of the budget season, but like that's, you know, almost a year away and another council away. So it would be nice to have this in a more timely manner.
Councillor Pettingill, you've got a hand there. I think that's legacy. Okay, great. That means I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Greenlaw are opposed. That motion passes. Or the amendment passes. Thank you, Councillor Stoner. So that takes us now to the main motion as amended. Are there any final thoughts on the main motion as amended? See, Councillor Herford, or Mayor Herford.
Thank you. I think the amendment helps on this. I do think that I'm still trying to, we just finished a big discussion around that included a lot of metrics for success. And we've heard that there's some staff work that isn't appropriate for an open meeting that is existing. I think before directing this work, that is work, even for consideration in budget. If there's curiosity into this, then having a discussion at a closed meeting where we can look at that as a council in the appropriate time and place would be a good next step on this to actually inform a future budget ask. So I'm not supportive of so for that reason, I won't be supporting the motion, although I am in support of finding efficiencies and making sure that our organization is running smoothly, but I don't think this is the appropriate place or tactic at this point in time with the information I have.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I will support this. I think, you know, we've asked to have this information ready for budget. And there will be, it sounds like from Councillor Stoner's upcoming motion, some more information in between so we can course correct if needed. Otherwise, we would have this information at the point when we could actually act upon it, which is at budget. And so I think this is a reasonable middle ground. Thank you.
Any other comments before I call the question? All those in favor of the main motion as amended? And opposed? Councillor Anderson, Councillor French, and Mayor Herford are opposed. The main motion as amended passes. Councillor Stoner.
Just briefly before I put a motion on the floor, can Mr. Valaneskis please remind me when that information can be brought back to council? Did you was it development review, the next development review touch point?
Through the chair, we have an item on the agenda planner right now that's related to the procedures bylaw work, and it'll be related to the delegation. It's in early March, so that wouldn't be too much effort, I think, to put on this information.
All right, I have a motion for council to consider that staff bring back available data on the development application processes when the procedures bylaw comes back to council.
Councillors, a seconder for that. Councillor Hamilton is seconding. And Councillor Stoner, would you like to speak further?
No, I'm happy just to let that one stand.
Councillor Hamilton, anything from you? Are there any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. And to the staff who have been waiting in the wings, thanks for your patience. Please join us. Yes, just a quick housekeeping update as our team gets in place. The 2026 Lower Mainland Local Government Association and Union of BC Municipalities Resolution Finalizations item, which is number 2, in staff reports. We're going to move that to the back end of today's committee of the whole, as the next two items both involve external and guests. So we'll move next into the update, Ketchum House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative, and then we'll follow that with the Climate Action Network update following. And it's looking like everybody's set at the other end of the table. So this next item is titled Update at Ketchum House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative, Conservation Areas Recognition within the District of Squamish. And it's item 3 amongst our staff reports. And I'll hand it over to our team for introductions.
Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. My name is Sam Wing. I'm the project manager at the House on Biosphere Region Initiative Society, and our executive director, Ruth Simons, and I presented to you last March. And I'm here to give a short update on the Conservation Areas Recognition Project within the District of Squamish. So I'll keep the background short because you've seen it before. You're probably all familiar with Canada's 30 by 30 target, and that's very much a part of the management of the Ketchum House Sound UNESCO Biosphere region as well. And bringing those international and national climate targets to the ground in the biosphere region is what we're talking about today. But in the way this target is tracked federally is in the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database, also known as CPCAD. You might hear me refer to it that way. And so what can be submitted into CPCAD falls within two kind of main categories. And the definition of these categories is put forth by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So protected areas are something we're all probably familiar with, tend to be conservation is a primary objective of the land management. And these are clearly defined areas with effective means in place in the long term for conservation of nature. And then there's a concept called other effective conservation measures. And these are areas that are other than a protected area that are governed and managed in ways that achieve positive and sustained long-term outcomes for the in situ conservation of biodiversity. Also kind of could be said, it's a way that biodiversity conservation may not be the primary objective of the land, but it is being achieved through the management practices in place. And so at a high level, what qualifies to be submitted into the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database are areas that have clearly defined geographical boundaries, are achieving conservation of biodiversity directly or in situ, and have mechanisms in place to prohibit actions incompatible with conservation and are intended to be protected in perpetuity. And so looking at the Ketchum House Sound Biosphere region, there's been real momentum built in this initiative since we last presented to you last March. There was an article in CBC in November about municipal contributions in BC to Canada's 30 by 30 target. And most of the municipalities in Howe Sound have contributed, including the District of Squamish, which I'm about to give an update on. And so that's been great progress. And we're about to see the database updated in the coming months. November is the deadline for submissions. And so the numbers in Canada are right now at about 14% in the terrestrial environment and 15% in the marine. And we're about to see those increase across the country and increase a little bit in the biosphere region. And the terrestrial environment in the biosphere region, about 33% is in the database already. And that's only about 3% in the marine within the Howe Sound Biosphere region. And so within the District of Squamish, this is a graphic that I showed last year in our presentation. As of the 2024 database update, 19% of the lands within the District of Squamish are currently in the database. And this shows a bit of a breakdown as far as what the protected areas and the OECMs that are in there look like. This will soon be recognized as 20% with the submission before the 2025 CPCAD deadline, which passed in November. And so what was submitted before that deadline, which was approved at the March 11th Committee of the Whole meeting, was 85 hectares. It was the final number of lands zoned P4, Ecological Reserve and Protection. And so these ended up going into the database as protected areas, mostly because it was proven through a series of screenings for eligibility that conservation was in fact a primary objective of the management of these areas, as well as supporting information such as district and community-led stewardship and monitoring practices. And so this brings the District of Squamish to 20% of the land base recognized as protected and conserved. And so what we're here to present about today is, after collaboration, once this submission was complete, we've assessed with collaboration with staff additional candidate areas for recognition in the database, focusing primarily on land zoned P3, park recreation and institutional use, and are requesting permission to register about 67 hectares of these areas. And so this is a map which was in the staff report as well of the areas in question, as well as a list. And this would round up District of Squamish to about 21% in the database in total. And really the rationale for these areas in particular, because of course within the District of Squamish, there's quite a lot of P3 zoned lands. But really, these are areas where there are riparian area protection regulations in place, important and sensitive habitats. There's a real role for ecological connectivity in a lot of these areas. They support wildlife movement pathways. They are supporting buffers between protected and developed areas, buffers between, stream setbacks, for example. This is also really an opportunity to showcase good management practices, and the idea here is that this would be an OECM recognition for these lands. And so what that really means is an opportunity to recognize lands where there's a balance of human impact and conservation taking place. And that can be very case by case as far as what that looks like. But this has been a thorough review to select these specific areas to showcase that. As well as showcasing, within the District of Squamish, there's some really amazing stewardship organizations and community-led monitoring practices. And so that all really supports the rationale for selecting these parks in particular. And so I'll just finish with also kind of the reminder of the importance of local governments in, contributing to Canada's 30 by 30 target. Municipal natural areas are largely underreported. And also there's a real benefit to local government here as far as, contributing to these global and national biodiversity goals, an opportunity to showcase good management practices. There's opportunities for collaboration with other local governments and conservation organizations. And then there's, a support, these processes support, future seeking of resources for conserved areas amidst a time when there's OCP reviews taking place, et cetera. And we are hoping to be able to complete this registration before the end of March, when our funding as an organization runs out, to be able to support this work. And with that, I will pass it on to staff. Thank you. Just switch this way.
Okay, that looks, is that sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So thank you to the chair and the committee. My name is Erin Urton, environmental specialist here with the district, and with me is Sarah McJannet, manager of community planning. And thanks to our delegate Sam for appearing today and for providing an update and information that lends context and support for the recommendations that are before the committee today. Before I move forward, I'll note that I'll refer to the Akatsum Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society as the Biosphere for this presentation. Our objectives related to the staff report are twofold. First, we are providing a confirmation that the district-owned P4 parcels identified to council in a past committee of the whole meeting that took place on March 11th, 2025 were accepted by the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas Database, herein referred to as CPCAD. These parcels are now registered and recognized as protected areas in the region. Also outlined in the aforementioned meeting, council directed staff to move forward with exploring additional district-owned natural areas as candidates for submission in effort to move us further along the path to attaining local and regional 30 by 30 targets. So we are also here seeking support from council for the Biosphere to submit a selection of district-owned P3 zoned parcels to the CPCAD. As Sam just mentioned, they have capacity funding for this until March 31st, 2026. So staff notes that the aim is to submit before that date. As a refresher or reiteration, this work aligns with several district plans and policies, including those in the Natural Areas Network contained within the official community plan and within the current District of Squamish strategic plan. Further, there's alignment with the Squamish Nation Climate Legacy Strategy, specifically goal number 6, to work towards protecting 30% of Squamish lands by 2030. I'll note too that the Biosphere has been engaging with the Squamish Nation on this project through the Squamish Connect referral portal and will continue to do so. So moving on to the selected parcels, as Sam mentioned, the project team has assessed several parcels owned by the district and selected a suite that are likely to meet the criteria for OECM recognition, recalling that OECM stands for Other Effective Area-Based Conservation Measures. And I'll just read the definition again. So OECMs are a geographically defined area other than a protected area, which is governed and managed in ways that achieve positive and sustained long-term outcomes for the in situ conservation of biodiversity. These areas may also have associated ecosystem functions and services, and where applicable, cultural, spiritual, socioeconomic, and other locally relevant values. So it seemed natural to assess P3 zone parcels after submitting those in P4, particularly because many of them are existing district parks. As per the zoning bylaw, the intent of the P3 zone is to accommodate the use of public land to serve the educational, park, and recreational needs of the district. Some of the major attributes supporting the selected parcels as good candidates are that many of these parcels provide essential buffers between protected and developed areas, facilitating not only the effective movement of wildlife and supporting ecological connectivity and function and thereby biodiversity, they also provide essential buffers for drainage. Further, although it's not easy to see on this map, most, if not all of these parcels are located in areas mapped as environmentally sensitive and include forests and or riparian areas or wetlands. So outside of the zoning for limited use, these areas are often, these areas and often the adjacent lands have additional protections through Development Permit Area 1 and the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Regulation, as well as other Provincial Water Sustainability Act regulations. Last, many of these areas are monitored by local stewardship groups, including the Squamish River Watershed Society, Squamish Streamkeepers, and Nature Squamish, just to name a few. This slide provides an example of one of the selected parcels, Merrill Park in the Garibaldi Highlands, noting its ESA attributes and the legal dedication as parkland. So to summarize, while conservation may not be the primary purpose or objective of these P3 lands, biodiversity is being maintained, is being conserved in situ through the current mechanisms for managing and stewarding the land. And last, I'll note too that the recognition and registration of these parcels as OECMs has no legal ramifications and places no additional restrictions on these parcels. On the ground, the district will continue to manage lands according to our extensive policies and guidelines, and will continue to uphold existing natural areas protection policies that guide us as we actively manage all lands within our jurisdiction. So to close, the recommendations before the committee are that council receive the project update regarding the submission of District of Squamish owned P4 lands to the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database. And that council directs staff to submit the proposed additional district-owned P3 parcels to the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database by the Akatsum Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society in 2026. So thank you all for your time, and thank you again to Sam for being here. And we look forward to any questions or discussion.
Thanks for the presentation. Council, we had planned to spend 15 minutes on this topic and we've blown through that already. And in light of the fact that we're well behind schedule, I'm hoping we can move through questions quickly and get to the motion. Councillor Anderson, I think you have questions, yes?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to start with an issue applying to both Merrill Park and to Smoke Bluffs Park, and that is forest fire risk and forest fire mitigation, and how it is considered within the program that we're talking about, as I don't see it referred to, and this concerns me. It also concerns me, by the way, that neither of these parks are addressed in the, as they might be in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and particularly in the Smoke Bluffs Park Management Plan. So I grew up next to Smoke Bluffs Park, and I've witnessed in my time 3 catastrophic forest fires. And this is, of course, a giant issue to consider in conservation of biodiversity. So my question is, how does forest fire risk mitigation and potential stand density and fuel removal treatments, which would be recommended, I assume, how does it fit within the OECM program goals and criteria? Is this a factor that should jump out at us to cause us to reconsider, or and I ask because I don't see reference to it. Forest fire risk, forest fire mitigation treatments, which can be quite intrusive. Thank you.
Staff, just before you answer, it was pointed out we did actually budget 30 minutes for this, so I stand corrected. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Sarah McJannet, Manager of Planning, Community Planning. Through the chair, thank you so much for this line of questioning. It is very important to consider wildfire mitigation, and especially as we deal with increasing concerns around climate shifts. And so in short, vegetation and fuel management activities on the ground do not make an OECM eligibility incompatible. Basically, those types of management activities can coexist and happen in these areas. The area recognition or the OECM areas are recognized as being managed for multiple purposes or values. I just want to note also, staff have been engaged in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan update and recognize that vegetation and fuel management is identified in that plan, also in specific reference to specific areas within the community, and Smoke Bluffs Park and Merrill Park, et cetera, being areas where there's potential for high impact adjacent to neighborhoods and areas. So I know that will be coming to council in future, and those kinds of operational pieces can be addressed in there, but the focus today is around the OECM, and we are can assure council that those management activities are we believe to be compatible, and we will find out also through the submission process and get feedback. Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I do have one other question. For the sake of brevity, I'll apply it to these 2 questions to Rose Park. It's not so long ago that there were rather different visions of the fate of Rose Park. That is, there were land transactions nearby which changed what we did as far as locating the adventure center and other concepts, but there was maybe open for a pavilion in Rose Park. So my point here is the status might change. We might change our mind about what it's for. And secondly, it is heavily used for cultural, social gathering functions rather than or alongside biodiversity. My question really is, if we change our mind, or if there's new deliberation, because there is a layers of planning that's gone on for Rose Park. There's all kinds of actors involved that are not mentioned in the report, and that's totally understandable. What kind of a process are we getting into as regards its constraints? Can we change our mind? What does that mean? Is there a further deliberation that's going to take place? As I suggest, I recommend consider the cultural and social and gathering functions of Rose Park. Is it an appropriate candidate? And there's even kind of between the lines questioning in the report regarding that particular example. I hope I'm clear. What are there constraints? Is there still flexibility to adjust our application process with respect to the selection of Rose Park? Thank you.
Thank you for the question through the chair. The first part of the question with respect to Rose Park and cultural and social and heritage aspects of the park and ongoing activities and management for those types of assets and things, those things can definitely happen in tandem. The OECM recognition does not, it's not mutually exclusive. Like we mentioned, there's multiple values and management activities that happen within these OECM areas. In terms of the flexibility or the application or the OECM designation, as Erin mentioned, there's no legal ramifications. There's no additional application of kind of policy or added regulatory restrictions around the designated lands that go into the database. It's a high level kind of recognition. Technically, lands could be withdrawn from the CPCAD if there was like a major shift or departure in terms of the use or of a specific land. And Sam can maybe speak a little bit more to what is known about the working with CPCAD and the database as well, but we don't see that as an issue in future.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And I had the same questions about this particular parcel. I think we'll find out if it's eligible in the submission process. It's certainly possible to submit only a chunk of a parcel of land. You can delineate which area, potentially the more biodiversity rich areas, for example. Also, as Sarah mentioned, a land could be removed from the database if it no longer, is in line with the eligibility criteria for OECM recognition. So there is flexibility in terms of the long-term plans for the parcel, or as the land may change over time. And I think, to summarize, we will find out if it qualifies in the submission process. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pettingill, I'll have you next, followed by Mayor Herford.
Yeah, thanks. A bit of a similar question. My understanding is that there are certain kinds of park designations where it's more challenging for us to move away from that once an area has been delegated. When I look at our P3 zoning, it allows a fair number of uses like colleges and universities, event storage, rec facilities, and so on. So I'm guessing that wouldn't have quite the same barrier to rezone it otherwise. So I'm just wondering, do we have a mechanism that sort of provides an extra level of diligence or protection if we did decide to change uses in the future? So if we wanted to do a bit more to maintain long-term compliance with OECM, could we sort of rezone this as a P5, and what would that look like? Or, what's proposed here with the P3 is really the best practice, the best we can do.
Through the chair, just in terms of the question around zoning of lands and P3 versus P4, for example, when we establish the P4 zone, the intention, and as council knows, there are very limited uses permitted, with the exception of like interpretive trail. Like the P4 zone is really for ecological protection. And for the P3, obviously, there's a much broader range of uses for the educational, recreational types of uses that zoning supports. When we look at across all of the P3 lands, we do recognize there are components of those lands within those parcels that might have wetlands or sensitive area or riparian. And as a practice, we haven't started kind of split zoning parcels to try to differentiate. It gets really complicated, and generally split zoning is not a great practice. So we try and stay away from that, except for the marine zones. That was a really special circumstance. So we do recognize that the P3 does have like this mix of uses and comprises like sensitive areas as well as, active structures and schools and play fields and things like that. So right now, we're not contemplating trying to necessarily like split zone or do that. We're living with kind of the P3. So there's no current plan to kind of make a shift there for those P3 lands. But I just want to clarify and reiterate for council, the P4 lands that were submitted through the CPCAD, those were accepted as protected areas, and the OECMs are different. This is a different category that recognizes the multiple uses and attributes. So those are quite distinct in the CPCAD database. So I hope that is helpful.
Councillor Pettingill, anything further?
No, that's good for now. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Herford is up next, followed by Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Thank you for the work on this and some questions in a similar genre to the first two speakers. What does I know the objectives of this go out, are looking ahead a little bit. So what does being included here come with any requirement to do an audit over time, maintain the list, like any sort of anything that way? I understand doesn't have a legal requirement attached to it and doesn't change the land use of what's happening there or zoning or anything like that. But what commitments are we making by participating here to monitoring over time or doing a point in time audit or something of these lands that are being included in this?
Thank you. Through the chair. At this point in time, to the best of my knowledge, there is no auditing process for, municipal governments, provincial governments, etc. Anyone that submits to this database. There is no annual check-in to all of the submissions or anything along those lines. There's also a fair bit up in the air as far as the Canadian government's continued commitment to this climate target in the future. So we will see how the database lives on. But the short answer would be no, there is no auditing process as of now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I was a little bit surprised to see that none of the golf course lands were identified, and I was wondering if anybody can speak to that.
We're only submitting district-owned parcels. Yeah.
Council, any further questions? We have a staff recommendation. Is anybody interested in putting that forward? Mayor Herford is moving the staff recommendation, and that is moved by Councillor Anderson. Mayor Herford, would you like to speak to it?
Just briefly, I'm supportive of this initiative and this step of that. I had some concerns around just what we're committing to as far as maintaining these things over time, but I do think it's important that we the protections we have in place in their various forms are recognized, and we can contribute in a way to this initiative. So I'm happy to support.
Councillor Anderson is the seconder on this, so I'll look to you for further comment, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report has been, for me at least, a good opportunity to pause and consider these and raise some questions, put out some information as well. And I look forward to a Parks and Recreation Management Plan update as perhaps another opportunity to dive further into the implications of the OECM program, but also issues in the management of these parks and their designation, which perhaps deserve discussion, won't be the opportunity for it today, such as fire risk, among other matters. Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, happy to support this. I think that maybe this is something to flag for the OCP. and things like the golf course. While we don't own the land, we do zone it or do some of the land use planning for it. And I think, you know, out of fear, actually, the feds may step away from this at some point in the future. I think this is such an important project to have some additional policy pieces where we can, enshrining our commitments, I think would be useful. So again, that's maybe something for our OCP update. And I would also just want to highlight the, I think, significant community involvement in this work, in Squamish community groups, but also throughout the whole corridor, and that work binding, I would say, communities throughout the Sea to Sky corridor together. I think, you know, we're running out of, or maybe overusing the land available to us in many ways. And I think turning our eye to this is so important. So I want to thank staff, but also all the large number of community members that have been involved in pulling all this together. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Also happy to support the motion on the floor. And thanks to the folks here today and to the community more broadly who continue to elevate our conversation. There's a line in the executive summary around how this would bring us up to 21% and how every little bit counts. And I think that is a big piece of this work, is making sure that we have the information in our systems, in our processes, and in our decision making, so that we can make informed decision on every little bit that will matter. And so thanks for continuing to provide a really broad perspective on the work more deeply. Thank you.
Councillor, are there any? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks to staff for the work on this, and the Akatsum Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative for their work on this. I think it's a very important work, particularly in that we recognize this these parcels as buffers. In my thinking, one of the really critical pieces of these lands are that buffer between human activity and non-human activity in ecological zones. We know that it's important for humans to get out into nature. It's important for us. It's important for education. It's important for us to understand what we need to conserve. And I think that these zones, in order to have that, we need humans going into these zones. We need humans going into nature. And by having these zones deliberately recognized as buffer zones, which balance human activity with things like biodiversity and other ecological factors, is an important step to take. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Seeing no further comments, I'll call the question. Council, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Councillor Pettingill, you've got a hand there. Is that legacy, or do you have something? Okay, very good. Staff and Ms. Wing, thank you very much for that. Now, Council, our next item is the Squamish Climate Action Network presentation. And I did see Ms. Tenbrink earlier. So I think that what I'd like to do is take a 5-minute recess so that the next delegation can set up. And then that's external. So once we are finished with that, I think we'll have time for a 30-minute lunch break. And we have to start our next meeting by 2:30. So I think that we're on track for this presentation, a lunch break of 30 minutes, and then reconvening somewhere around 2:30. Mayor Herford, does that sound workable?
We'll get as far as we can. I do think we do have the ability, if we need to recess this meeting, start the other meeting, and do that shuffle. But I'd like to avoid that. So let's see what happens.
Yes. Okay, I'm with you there. So 5-minute recess. 5-minute recess, and then our next presentation. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, folks, as we swing back from a recess and launch into our next item, which is an update from the Squamish Climate Action Network. This is the annual update on the Squamish Valley Agricultural Plan implementation progress. It's all yours.
We're ready. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. Yeah, I'll be doing an update on the Squamish Valley Agriculture Plan, as well as the partnership agreement and the food hub development. So to kick things off, in the start of 2025, and I know that some of you have already seen this presentation from the SLRD, so I've tried to spice it up a little bit. We had a really great visit from the Agriculture and Agri-Food Minister, Lawrence McCauley. It was really nice to have, some of you were there. We had some really great fruitful discussions about future funding for food and agriculture programs, community programs, as well as some barriers with that exist within GAP certifications. And so that's kind of a collaborative project and conversation that we're looking to have with the whole region, because there's an impact to farmers across the whole region in selling to grocery stores. In particular, GAP certification is great for larger farm businesses, not so great for smaller and medium-sized farm businesses. So it's really great to welcome him here, and we've got some work to do with Patrick Weiler as we move things forward. With regards to land matching and working with young agrarians, we did have one successful match in Brackendale this year on a small plot. We have a list of about 6 food and farm businesses or farmers that are looking for land. We were able to have some conversations with landowners as well, in particular, mostly in the Squamish Valley, but also in Brackendale as well. So we're still on the hunt for looking for properties and trying to find those land matches. I will say working with young agrarians continues to be wonderful. And I think having somebody like ourselves that's sort of boots on the ground and able to really facilitate those relationships is quite helpful. Because they don't live here and they're sort of, provincial wide, and now they're across the country. Sarah, myself, and Claire from the SLRD presented at UBCM. Some of you were there. Thank you for joining us. We presented on a session about from policy to plate about local food leadership. It was really about practical strategies on how to turn policy into action. And we were able to share the last almost decade of working with the district closely with food and farms, and share some practical examples, and hopefully inspired some people in the audience to understand the potential that their communities have to support nonprofits in their food and farm work as well. We also visited the Cowichan Co-op Food Hub and had an opportunity to learn a little bit about what's working and not working there. So we sort of can learn from some of the challenges and not and be able to pivot as needed for our own food hub in our community. We also visited the mustard seed facility and the South Island Food Hub, as well as got to see Flourish, the school meal program. In the mustard seed facility, if you've ever been there, it's a really large facility with a lot of different food services, specifically to support over 50 food banks across the island region. But in their commercial kitchen, they're running 1,000 meals a day for their school meal program. So it's pretty impressive. We're a mini version of that at the 55 Center for sure. But it was great just to see all their infrastructure and some of the big, just any of the big supply or tools that they're using to do high volume catering. The school farm had another really great year. We definitely had some pests this year, which impacted our crops. I think just the main highlight for this one is we were able to secure a contract with Vancouver Coastal Health, which we'd been working on for 3 years. And we finally got that signed, and we're able to now sell food from the farm, as well as we can wholesale from other farmers across the region to sell collectively to the hospital. It's been really interesting to learn about their unique needs. As we age, we lose our taste buds. So instead of flavoring with salt, we can flavor with herbs. And everyone's there's also different dietary needs and restrictions up there as well. So we've been working with them to purchase seeds and come up with a seasonal planting plan
for specific crops that are going to work for them. So we're really excited about that relationship. And last year was really the kickoff for it. And yeah, just to highlight, we also have had now to date over 100 students go through the farm studies credited class, which is an elective at the high school that any grade 10 and 11 or 12 can enter. Okay, so we are now moved in and officially in the 55 Center as of July 1st. And I first just wanted to say thank you so much for your leadership, also for the staff's leadership and all the staff that have been supporting this work as we've been sorting out everything. The team there has been incredibly welcoming for us, as well as the seniors and the senior society. Can you make this a little bigger over here? Or no, maybe not. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. So when we took over in July, we kind of just jumped right in. We did a big deep clean. We reorganized the kitchen. We worked with the seniors and the district staff to sort of sort out where is everything going that might be in here, because we may or may not need it. So some things have been moved around. We got certified to operate. We have an MOU with the 55 Senior Society, and we've done lots of community engagement, which include presenting at their annual general meetings and just doing lots of casual engagement because we see them there all the time. We were able to purchase a new rationale and tilt skillet with some funding from Maison Canada. That's, you're looking at this picture in the top right, you're looking at $70,000 of kitchen equipment. But this allows us to do high volume food. So we can cook a chili for 500 kids in one go. And it kind of tells you what to do. So it's great. We're also providing some catering services to the 55 Center users. That's through monthly birthday catering services, daily baked goods and soup at a low cost. And then we did their annual Christmas dinner or holiday winter dinner in December. And it was great. I know you were there, Mayor Herford. And yeah, it's been really wonderful just to be in that space. And I have heard from the staff that since food is available there generally Tuesday to Friday, there's just so many more people in this space. So we're really happy to hear that. We have some future plans to perhaps do some frozen meals to go. And we're just going to keep working with the seniors and try to come up with those win-win opportunities that works for us as well as for them and other attendees of the space. We obviously, you may know that we've launched the school meal program out of that space. That was sort of the original intention was for agri-food businesses, but we had shifted the plan to kind of do both. So we've launched the school meal program, which has been able to, it purchases $1,000 a day of food every time the program runs on average. And 72% of that is coming from BC producers and growers. We're feeding about 400 to 500 kids a day during instructional days. And that's actually increased because now we're serving House on Secondary and Don Ross with some just sort of cold items to go in the fridge and in the fridge sort of 5 days a week. And this has grown our operations. It doubled it. So we grew by 100%. And this was really going to help us decrease our dependency on grants. And so this investment from the partnership agreement and just getting this whole operation launched has been an incredible opportunity for us to really establish ourselves with financial sustainability and being able to offer the community incredible services. That's really a win-win. And moving on, so the Harvest Hub, has anyone driven by and seen that thing going on? Loggers Lane? No? Okay, now you have to go. So on your way home today, take a drive by Loggers Lane, just by the hydro station. This facility has gone up really quickly. We got the shipping containers in November, December, and we're at the, right by the hydro facility before the railway tracks where everyone sort of parks. And yeah, it's really exciting to have this underway. This has really been we've been talking about this project for probably 7 years. And it feels really incredible to be able to open the doors for 2026. This is a facility that is going to support local producers and small scale farms and agri-food businesses in the Squamish to Lillooet and even sort of in the Vancouver region as as well. So it's kind of a 100-mile sort of thing. It is going to have cold storage. So the large containers, cold storage, the short containers, dry storage with stand-up freezer space in it, and dry storage as well. So if you purchase from a business in Pemberton, they might offer you eggs and honey and vegetables and herbs. So you could do all your own purchasing direct from them, and then they deliver it to the Harvest Hub, and you kind of choose Harvest Hub pickup. It's a self-automated building, so you have a code to access it and instructions on where you go and pick up your items from. So it's pretty, we're kind of being brave penguins with this project a little bit. And we've sort of taken and heard from 20 different organizations and food hubs across the continent and asked them what worked and what didn't work. So we designed something that we believe is going to work. The farmers are on board. Yeah, it is happening. And we can always pivot as needed, of course. So our timeline is construction is happening right now. All the back end work is getting flushed out with tenant agreements. March, April's a bit of a final touches and soft launch, and May to December will be fully operational. And of course, lots of reflecting. The farmers and agri-food producers that are using the space know that they're signing up for a bit of a pilot project. They're going to help us work through any bugs and kinks that may not be working, but we've got staff ready to stand by. And yeah, definitely go check it out. There's some final design pieces starting to happen, and we're working really closely with district staff, what feels like from all of the teams, engineering, transportation, planning, economic development. So we've been doing a lot of work with everybody. This was a slide that Sarah made for the UBCM presentation, and I thought it was just a really nice opportunity to share with you folks sort of the long-term investment and contributions from local government and how significant we've been, well, the significant impact of it in being able to leverage external funds back into our community, but also be able to generate our own revenue to diversify, to diversify our income, but also to sustain the work that we do, which is always the thing with nonprofits, right? Like we're essential to society, but yet not always treated as so. And so investing in us being able to be self-sustainable is incredible. And I think that this is a wonderful model of what other organizations could do. And yeah, it's been great. So hopefully, well, that's there for you to have a peek at. Anything else to add to that? No. Okay. Here's a little overview of the year. We were able to bring in over $350,000. Most of it was specifically for the food hub development, both the kitchen and the Harvest Hub. We've got some confirmed funding moving forward for 2026. And yeah, we're just really excited to open all of those doors. My last slide is just a thank you and to ask questions, but maybe I'll leave this up in case there's any questions on funding. Questions?
Council, what are your questions? Councillor Stormer.
Are you doing catering for other types of events yet? And perhaps like the Squamish Youth Council, and you're already talking about it, but they want to do a youth summit and they're looking for catering.
Really, oh, thanks. We're not really set up right now for off-site catering. I don't know if we will go in that direction because we're going to be renting out the kitchen after hours and on non-instructional school days to agri-food businesses. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? Yeah, we're running out of space. Feeding 500 kids a day, plus seniors, plus. We're just running out of space. Yeah. Yeah, space is the limitation, fridge and freezer space. Yeah.
Council, any further questions? I have one of my own. The facility new on Loggers Lane.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about permanent, temporary. Is that portable at all, or is it designed to be there long term?
So we have a 5-year license with the district, and it was designed to be moved if needed. Yeah, it's on shipping containers, and so we can easily hire somebody to come in and essentially move it. We really love the location though.
Yeah, that was
But yeah.
my sense from the photos and what I've seen driving by
Yeah.
is that it's for sure not fully permanent, and it does have that element of movability. And Ms. McJannet, did you have more?
I'll just add that through the chair, it's very much a pilot, and it's been sort of set up as a pilot to learn and see how it works. And this is a great opportunity to kind of test it, test the facility and the usage and all the partnerships. So,
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Stoner, you want to move to receive the presentation, and that's seconded by Mayor Herford. Are there any comments?
Some of us have had the pleasure of seeing this presentation twice because you folks were at the Regional District Board not too long ago, but I could listen to it over and over again. Thanks for all the work, and this is both to you, Crystal, and your team, but also the collaboration that has been created with the different orders of government, so not just our municipal staff, but the regional district. The presentation at UBCM, I think I've said this to you folks, but I have a little bit of insider knowledge because I'm chair of convention committee, so I get to see all the ratings after. It was one of the highest rated clinics across everything that was presented during UBCM at convention that week. And undoubtedly, I got so many questions about like, how have you done that? And it just presented this amazing picture of like really what was a seed and a dream and a whole bunch of policy work that happened and how that got integrated and implemented into like very real, tangible projects that are like so meaningfully impacting our community now. And so it just like the storytelling behind how that presentation was provided, I think really galvanized a lot of people to be like, oh, this is possible. And it might take some time, it might take some dedication, but it is totally doable. I am so ecstatic to hear that the activation of the 55 Center Kitchen is happening. And it is, we always knew it was like, if we had the right people, you build it and they will come. And we've wrestled back and forth with the Senior Society a few times on what that looks like. And so I just like, thank you for finding a way to fill that gap in a productive and viable way. And yeah, so I will get off my high horse now and just say thanks for all the work.
I see your hand, Councillor Pettingill, and Mayor Herford, you're the seconder. Go ahead.
I'll climb on that high horse that you just vacated, Councillor Stoner. But I think, no, just thank you for all the hard work so far and ongoing. I think this slide actually shows I mean, I could probably speak at length on each of the slides, but just shows the how much cooperation has happened here, and that doesn't just happen. That's cultivated by yourself and your organization as well. And I think it really is a remarkable story. And now that this, as all of your initiatives are advancing, we've got so many great stories to tell. And I hope that storytelling piece of it continues so that folks coming along behind and learning those lessons can be inspired by, and also can hear the cautionary tales, because there's not perfection isn't a reasonable thing to achieve. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned there, and it's a great success. And I'm really excited, as you mentioned in your presentation, we heard from Councillor Stoner already about the activation at the 55. I was there for the dinner, which was the group was very impressed, as was I, and it was just so great to see really community coming together and sharing a meal is just such a great way to do that and to come together, and that it can be locally produced and is the cherry on top. So thank you so much for your continued work.
Councillor Pettingill, followed by Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks. This is my second run through the presentation, and it just makes me feel fantastic to see everything that's being accomplished. It's been frustrating, the underutilization of the 55 activity, and now seeing where it's gotten to, and the the fact that we could actually use more space there, that we're sort of over and above what's there now, and just maximizing the use is so fantastic. It's also having me reflect some recent events at Totem Hall and thinking about the sick parade, just the central importance of something so simple like food in bringing community together, actually building community. I think it is a reminder to me as we think about future engagement and community building and some of those things, how important and central food should or can be to that. I think this is a good reminder of that. So just thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks through the chair. I'm really happy to see this work going forward, and I love to see your movement towards financial sustainability as well. It's just so important that we support our local growers as much as possible and help them get their products to the market that is very keen to access it. I think it's so important from a climate perspective that we have resiliency with our growers and that we protect our growers, because that is something that's being heavily eroded right now. So I'm really happy to see this coming to fruition. I love all the work you're doing to feed the youth and the elders. I'm just so happy to see people like you committing so much time and energy and love to keeping our youth and our elders nourished. This is one of my happy places in council, so thank you. I just want to thank you all so much for the work you've been doing, both our staff and Squamish Can, of course. Like, stories like these are super inspirational, and I hope others in our community and others in other communities are inspired by your ingenuity and hard work. So thank you so much.
I too am speaking in support of the motion, not seeing any interest over here. And in supporting the motion, acknowledge the great work that the Climate Action Network is doing in our community, quietly and in many cases under the radar. You ask almost anybody in town if they've heard of the organization and what it's up to, and most would likely say they have no idea, which says to me that the organization is one that is out to produce results and not necessarily looking for acknowledgement and fanfare and awards and all of those other ego-driven things. So thank you for the great work. And with that, I'll turn to Councillor Greenlaw for a final thought.
Sorry, there's just one other thing. I mean, I guess maybe follow this up on email. If there's something that we can advocate for to help with that gap piece of smaller producers having difficult access to grocery markets and stuff.
Gap certification. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Excellent. And with that, if there are no other comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And Councillor Pettingill, you've got a hand again, but I think that's legacy. Just want to check in. Yep. Okay, good. All right. Now, Council, it is 1:33. We have 2 items left on our agenda, the LMLGA UBCM resolutions, which are part of this committee of the whole, and our special meeting. Also, we want to get a lunch break in. So I think what I might suggest is we take our break now at 30 minutes and we come back at 2. Mayor Herford, we then open the special and delay that so that we can do the LMLGA.
I would suggest that what we can commit to now is we take our break, and when we come back, we'll have a course of action.
Very good. So let's be back here ready to go at 5 minutes after 2. Councillor Greenlaw.
Well, we just have an elder in the audience who seems to have something to say or wants to hear, and I'm just wondering if we should ask her what she needs.
Hi, Saswalia. Come have a seat. There's, hold on, just 1 second. There's a microphone right in front of you. We'll get Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks for seeing me. Eric was at the Multicultural Day, and he invited me for an issue that was coming up at your table. I missed you. No, I was like, it was a success. It was our 33rd year for the Multicultural Day, and the house was full. And for the number of people that I need to share this with you, because we have new people, new residents in Squamish, and some of them hadn't even been here for 2 months. And they heard about me and they came over and asked if they could join, and I said, most definitely. The whole thing is about the racism, bullying, etc., from the streets. And we're getting more youth there now, and which that's what we need to reach. I had the leadership class from Howe Sound there, grade 10, 11, and 12. That was their first day ever serving people. And some of them are on the spectrum. They're on the spectrum of all the medical things you can think of. But I had them serving total strangers. And they asked me if they could work with me more. That was the first day being with me, but they followed all the instructions, the old way we used to teach. You know, volunteer do. But the couple of them are in special needs classes, etc. But they learned how. I just told them be polite, dress properly, look accordingly, serve the elders and the seniors. Anybody older than you is a senior to them. So they know I put a lot in the kitchen, some on the floor. The ones that don't really talk to people, I put them on the floor. So they had no choice but to talk, right? And then they came back, I can't. I said, yes, you can get back. That's the kind of teaching I do. I had my class that I just finished teaching. Those kids are all on the spectrum from kindergarten to grade 9. They can't function in District 48 schools. They can't learn that way. So what I do is hands-on cultural teaching. And the teaching that I do is all before residential school. For example, I teach them how to make fish head soup. We do weaving, cedar weaving, wool weaving, and I get them to use the tools in the forest. We very seldom go to the store to buy anything. I use material that's donated, say to Pearls or whatever. It looks like deer hide or bear hide. And I show them how to stretch it. You know, we usually actually use the works outside a building, right? You don't use popsicle sticks. You actually use sticks from the forest. And they're taught not to harm the wilderness. They're taught how to sleep, eat, and survive out there. Old Indian way. Because you have a lot of campers and whatever the paragliders, all costing you guys tax money. These kids are learning not to do that. If you're not prepared, you don't go. But the reason I'm here was not about that. I went off track. Is I heard you have interest down by the Adventure Center in Rose Park. So I don't know who the people are. Eric, you'll have to fill me in. But I want to remind council, the ones of you that don't know, that used to belong to Squamish Nation, that land. Sure, we're not out there, but that is where the herring are, used to spawn up that channel. We just opened the channel. It's like the steam people. And now it's nice. Like, we don't want it being, Rose Park is a really happy memory for Squamish. Rose used to do the paper. And as I don't know, a lot of you know that a lot of people get married there. And I do bring one-on-one counseling there. Like for people that want to learn off a First Nation person how to live in this world with so many negativities around. So I bring people there in a quiet area. They're not judged. But I always tell them, look how beautiful our town is. You got to take some of the beauty and put it in yourself. So some of us do use it yet. And one day, I'm hoping this council will look at a museum or an interpretation center, and that would be ideal there. Because Adventure's not bringing in a lot of people. We need to add Squamish Nation in there somewhere. And I would really, really, really like to tell you guys to start talking to us that live here. Not North Shore. They don't know anything. You got rookies on that council. They don't even know how to live up here. We have over 100 elders now. Like we're in our era now, the 70s, and up. Like we only have Ma, she's 94. Her brother is 92. So Bob's wife is getting up there too. We only have maybe 4 that age group in Squamish. And we grew up here and lived here and we've seen the change. So I'm really, really asking all of you that are here now and for the future, could you include us in these things? Because we walk these roads with you guys. We protect the waters. We watch for things for that development doesn't look, we're not looking at the almighty dollar.
Donna, we've heard you. We've got the request.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming and chatting with us. We have to get on with our meeting.
Yeah, no.
And feel free to reach out to us individually if you want follow-ups.
Because I would like a follow-up presentation from these people that presented to you. They should be consulting with us.
Okay.
I'd really, really implore you, you know, like we've always had it in the past. Don't change it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's call that 2:10. We're back here at 2:10. Thank you. In recess. All right, so we're reconvening our committee of the whole meeting. And during the break, I consulted / conspired with Mayor Herford, and we have a plan for how we're going to move forward. We are going to recess this committee of the whole meeting and move into our special, which Mayor Herford is going to chair. So I'm going to hand it over to the mayor.
So we'll recess the committee of the whole meeting to reconvene following the completion of the special business meeting. And I will now open the special business meeting. So welcome to the special business meeting in the District of Squamish for Tuesday, February 10th. Holland the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. For a motion to close, please. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll take a quick recess while we close the room. We need to switch links and we'll continue the meeting. Thank you.